Hello and welcome once again to F Sobriety. My name is Craig Woods and we are going to get that black mole, James!
And coming to you live and electrified from Studio A, high atop the escarpments of Whitetail Peak, the roof, rough, of the American Hindu Kush. This is James Hamilton doing the vamp for podcasting, climbing the ramp to Twin Peaks The Return Parts 5 and 6, and lighting the lamp of TV discussion. So, what's in your mind tonight, Craig? You know I'm going to tell you what's in mine, and you know what's in mine? The fucks are at it again. The fucks in this case being Craig and myself, and our special guest host, Alan Todd.
Alan, who is not currently with us as yet, he will be joining us later, and it's a pity he's not here right now because he would have fully appreciated your very well researched and prepared intro there, James. Hats off.
Thank you. How you been, Craig?
I've been not too bad, thanks for asking. How about yourself?
I've been alright.
So, we are back today to talk more Twin Peaks The Return. We are moving on with our rewatch of that particular opus, and on this particular podcast episode we will be discussing parts 5 and 6 of Twin Peaks The Return. What are they otherwise known as, James? Refresh our memory.
Also known as Part 5, Case Files, and Part 6, Don't Die.
And they were both directed by David Lynch, and they were both written by Mark Frost and David Lynch.
Which is a credit you should get used to for the rest of Twin Peaks The Return. Before we get into the meat of it all, before we get into the Twin Peaks The Return chat, however...
Before we get into Sonny Jim's birthday cake...
We do have other business to take care of, as we often do.
As is our wont on this podcast, we are a general pop culture podcast, so we do like to discuss other things and keep abreast of things that are delighting us each and discuss those. So we do tend to have a part of each podcast where we discuss some other extracurricular things. So I think this is the point where I should hand over to our resident AI, the Hamiltron, who will direct you listeners who are only here exclusively for Twin Peaks chat. She will direct you to exactly the place where you need to be. And just forewarning, if you are going ahead with that, this is a rewatch podcast, which means it will be a spoiler-filled discussion. We will be talking about parts 5 and 6 in the context of the entirety of Twin Peaks The Return. So if you have not seen The Return in its entirety, this is not the podcast for you, or at least not yet. By all means, watch the totality of The Return, then come back and join us and join the party. Alright, Hamilton, tell them where to go. Politely.
Dear listener, to skip past our host's usual smorgasbord of off-topic popular culture chat, and, in particular this episode, unfiltered leftist political ranting, and get straight to the Twin Peaks discussion, skip to 56 minutes and 15 seconds. If you're sticking with us, apologies in advance, not for Albert, but for the slight interference you may hear on this recording. Rest assured this disappears around 38 minutes. Technology, am I right? Now back to the chodes.
And thank you, Hamilton. Alright, James, what's been happening in the cultural landscape? It's all yours. What have you spotted?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Craig, because as I sit here with my Williams Brothers Rubus Grapefruit IPA, very tasty, highly recommended.
Right.
I can confirm that I have in fact been catching up with a little more on the pop culture side than last episode. Mm-hmm. I was delighted, absolutely positively delighted to discover that something you've been telling me I should watch for ages but have been unable to do so has surfaced on the internet. That's right, listeners. Long-time listeners of the podcast will know that we've mentioned this before. We occasionally reference it and make jokes about it, but a long time ago, Craig suggested that, what with me being a huge fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer from back in the day, and in general, a bit of a Sarah Michelle Gellar fanboy, I should check out Sarah Michelle Gellar's televisual follow-up to Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the ill-fated, cancelled after one season CW crime thriller Ringer.
It's everything in that sentence, in that last part of your sentence there, it was like one adjective after another that just progressively somehow got worse.
And Ringer, it appeared, was very difficult, nigh on impossible by the time I decided to get round to trying to find it, to locate anywhere on the internet through any means.
You're you are a pirate.
Until while I was editing the previous episode of this podcast, I needed to get the Ringer theme to put in the background of a Ringer joke. Sometimes if I'm trying to find like sound effects, I'll just go on YouTube and just search for something and then record it in. So I searched YouTube for Ringer theme, and lo and behold, some genius has uploaded every episode of Ringer to YouTube. So I have begun watching Ringer.
The show is so utterly forgotten that even executives from the CW haven't even bothered to notice that the entire series is up there on YouTube. Fantastic. Always a sign of quality.
And it is absolute tripe.
Is it or is it not everything I promised?
It is absolute tripe, and I love it. It is brilliant.
We should explain to the listeners, my pitch to James as to why you would enjoy it is that it is just so utterly, unbelievably terrible, but there is something weirdly sort of compelling about it at the same time, partly because it is so... I don't want to say so bad it's good, because that's such an overused phrase, and I'm not entirely sure it's true of Ringer, but it's bad in a particular way that's just sort of morbidly curious. And there is something weirdly compulsive about it. I watched it years ago. How many years has it been since I've been trying to get you to watch this thing?
It's been a long time.
I think I was just at a loose end one particular weekend, and I had access to the whole thing. And it's like an old-style American TV drama, as in it has 22 fucking episodes in the season. So whatever that low point I was going through, it lasted a while. But Ringer, somehow, it brought me exactly this sort of very lowbrow entertainment, which was exactly what I required in that moment.
For those unfamiliar with the plot, it concerns Sarah Michelle Gellar playing twin sisters, both roles, with some of the best green screen work the mid-2000s has to offer. And by best, I mean worst.
You say mid-2000s, it's a wee bit later than you think. It came out, I think, in 2011. It's 10 years old this year.
Yeah, so really they've got no excuse for how shoddy the green screen work is occasionally. So I'm thinking particularly of the boat scene in episode 1, where I was crying with laughter at the obviously filmed against the green screen and just threw some water at Sarah Michelle Gellar.
Quality.
But she plays twin sisters, one of whom is on the run from being a witness in a murder trial, and she goes to visit her successful sister, and her successful sister kills herself, so she adopts her sister's persona, but then it turns out her sister was mixed up in a whole bunch of weird crime stuff, and spoiler alert, her sister faked her own death.
Yeah.
So I'm 2 episodes in, so that's as much as I know right now, but it is hilarious.
It's weirdly got all of the same sort of tropes, and even a lot of the same acting style and general sort of mise-en-scène as you would find in a 90s daytime American soap opera. But it sort of fancies itself as a cutting-edge drama, and it's just so morbidly fascinating to watch a show that has such a deluded sense of its own quality.
I will happily sit and watch Sarah Michelle Gellar try her damnedest to act her way out of a paper bag.
Well, I'm glad you finally got around to it. You're finally basking in the joy of Sarah Michelle Gellar's high point of her career. I'm sure we will all remember it as. I'm sure when Sarah Michelle Gellar reaches the end of her life, she'll look back and say, Ringer is the thing of which I'm most proud.
I can't wait for 25 years from now for Ringer the Return.
Directed by David Lynch.
It was a tulpa all along.
100-year-old David Lynch directing Ringer the Return. Here for it.
Have any televisual delights, or visual delights I should say, been piquing your interest at all, Craig?
Yeah, funny you should ask. I was investigating the 3rd season of... I can't even remember if we spoke about this show before. Did you ever see the show Slasher? It was originally on Netflix. It's a Canadian anthology show, which I'm sure I don't need to describe what the genre is. The title somewhat gives it away.
Romantic comedy, I'm guessing.
That's the one. It's a really fun series. I remember I watched the 1st season on Netflix a couple of years ago, not expecting very much, and it was actually a very tightly plotted, really well acted. It's 8 episodes every season, so it's a concise enough story, and each season makes really good use of the 8-episode format. And it's got just enough nods to all the classic slasher movies, all the tropes that you want. But at the same time, each single season has had something of a modern twist to it, and I've really enjoyed all 3. But last year it moved to Shudder, and apparently we didn't get the 3rd season on Netflix over here, so I'd never saw it. and eventually the first 2 seasons disappeared, and then I kind of forgot all about it. But then access to the 3rd season came my way recently, and I was like, okay, I'll give that a look. But weirdly, I was looking online to see what some people were saying about the 3rd season, and a lot of people were saying it was their least favourite one. And I was like, oh well. But then I stuck it on, and I actually think it's my favourite of the 3. So, Redditors, I'm sorry to disagree with you, but I actually think it was very strong. I'll give you a brief outline of the plot. As I say, it's an anthology show, so if you get hold of it, you can watch them in any order. So if you fancy watching the 3rd season, go ahead. It's set largely inside this one apartment block where there has been, a year prior, there has been one particular brutal murder just outside of one of the residents. And then a year later, the subtitle of it is Solstice, and the serial killer, the killer in it is called The Druid, and has basically just a kind of Scream costume, but with a druid mask, essentially. And it's actually extremely well plotted. The characterization is really strong as you gradually find out what each of the characters who live in this building, what their secrets are, what their relationships are, why it eventually becomes clear why someone might be trying to kill them all. Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's got some nice socio-political stuff in it. It's got a really diverse cast, and there's like, it's got queer characters, characters of different races, and it deals a lot with class differences. And there's like a character who's a mad white supremacist in it as well, and there's just a lot of very interesting stuff going on. I will say I feel a wee bit confused about what the message might be in the ending of the last episode. It left me feeling very, I don't know what it is exactly they were trying to say there with that ending, but I really enjoyed it. All the episodes were really strong, and if you enjoy your slasher movies, if you enjoy that whole genre, I don't know why you wouldn't enjoy it, despite what many people on Reddit said. So getting about it. But as I say, the other 2 seasons are also quality. So it's fun to catch up with that, finally. What else have I watched on TV? I watched the first episode of a 3-part documentary series on BBC by Steve McQueen, not the deceased actor from The Great Escape, the other Steve McQueen, responsible for Small Axe last year. But his new 3-part documentary series is called Uprising, and it deals with certain key events in London in the late 70s and the early 80s, and the first one was all about the New Cross House fire. It's a harrowing watch, I'm not going to lie.
I was going to say, I can't imagine it's a barrel of laughs.
Yeah, it's got a lot of eyewitness accounts, but at the same time, about the first half of that episode doesn't even talk about the fire. It talks about all of the things that were going on to do with racial tensions in London in the years prior. So, it's Steve McQueen, you know what to expect by now. So he goes a lot into kind of sound system culture in the 70s, and
all right, nice.
There's a lot of stuff in it that I was really digging. I got to actually subtitle it at work, so these are the moments where it's quite nice to have a job like mine.
The rare gem where you actually enjoy the... Nice.
But yeah, it's harrowing, but extremely interesting. Steve McQueen has a way of taking a very particular angle on these stories and making them very human, very real, very, very personal. Yeah, I cannot recommend it enough. I'm really looking forward to seeing the other 2 episodes. I think the only other telly I've watched since we last talked is Masters of the Universe Revelation.
Masters of the Viewesque Universe. That's a Kevin Smith joke for anyone that didn't understand that.
I was thoroughly underwhelmed. Although I find myself in the curious position of also wanting it to succeed just because it's upset a load of incels and neckbeards online. Purely because Tila is essentially the main character. Spoiler. Yeah. But that happens in the first episode. It's not a big spoiler. The frustrating thing for me about it is there's actually some quite cool ideas in it. Oh my god, though, the execution, it takes itself so damn seriously. And I don't know what it was in Kevin Smith's head that he thought, you know what the original cartoon was really missing? For about 50% of each episode to just be taken up by a load of gurning, unearned pathos. That's what it needed. It's like, mate, this is a thoroughly ridiculous toy commercial about a man in furry pants fighting a guy with a skull for a face. Just let it be silly. I mean, it's only 5 episodes. It's not going to take up much of your time. And to be honest, I'm probably going to watch the second half when it drops because I might as well. But it wasn't what I hoped for. And I say that with the full awareness of the fact that I am a 40-something man complaining about a cartoon.
For children.
We have to always remember that that's the case. And, bring ourselves back to Earth, not Eternia, and say, grow up, guys. It's not that serious.
If men in their 40s aren't going to be giving heart attack surviving clerks directing Kevin Smith, death threats on Twitter, who is?
I will say this about Masters of the Universe. I was hugely into it as a kid. I loved it. I loved He-Man. I loved Skeletor. I loved all that shit. What I don't really understand, though, is anybody who could have loved that as a kid and carried that love into adulthood. It's not the kind of thing that carries across. It's not like Marvel or DC where there's been so many different variations of those characters that I can understand why people still have a certain, fondness or investment in that stuff. That's not true with He-Man. You know what I mean? He-Man has always been utterly ridiculous. And the original Filmation cartoon, as much as I have a huge nostalgic affection for it, I've never once sat down as an adult and went, oh yeah, this still stacks up. So I worry for these guys out there for whom it's a real cause of genuine upset that Kevin Smith has quote-unquote ruined their childhood. I'm like, mate, come on, get a grip of yourself.
Yeah, like I said, I've not watched it yet, but I'm going to watch it because I really enjoy Kevin Smith's chat more than his movies these days, to be fair. I quite like his podcasts and stuff. And obviously, I know, Mark Bernardin wrote an episode and I love Mark Bernardin and stuff, but more than that, as we discussed mere moments ago, Sarah Michelle Gellar's in it, so of course I'm going to watch it.
Well, naturally, it's a foregone conclusion.
Hello.
Oh, just in time, just like that.
It's Alan Todd.
Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only, a recurring guest. He's part of the furniture now. Mr. Alan Todd, how are you, sir?
First of all, fuck Gene Kelly, that motherfucker. Second of all, I'm very good. Yourselves?
We're all right.
We're just catching up on recent televisual happenings.
You're actually just in time, because I was just talking about Masters of the Universe Revelations. We were about to segue off into something else, but I might as well ask you, have you given it a watch?
I watched the first episode and I was severely underwhelmed. And then I saw your post on Facebook, which kind of just summed it right up, which was you had one job, Smith. How do you make Skeletor and not make him funny? Like, what is the point?
Aye, that seems like a major own goal from where I'm sitting. But I was just saying to James and to the listeners, one of the disappointing things for me is there's actually some quite cool ideas in it that could have been explored in a fun way. Like, one thing I will mention, and this is pretty funny, as I say it, it's the kind of thing that will make you laugh because it's just so ridiculous. But in the ensuing decades after He-Man's quote-unquote disappearance, let's put it that way, and magic disappears from Eternia, all of Eternia has to learn to adapt, and Snake Mountain becomes this high-tech fortress where there's no magic, and Triclops is now in charge. Nice. And Triclops has started this fanatical cult in praise of technology, and one of the things he utters is hail to the holy sprocket and stuff like this. Now,
the dog from Fraggle Rock.
That should be funny, but somehow it's so leaden in its execution that I'm like, I feel like you definitely missed the mark here. But aye.
What was the point? Do you know what I mean? Like, did you ever read the most recent DC Comics adaptation, the Masters of the Universe?
Can't say so.
Yeah, it was quite po-faced as well.
Right, see, this is what I was just saying to James. I don't understand how you can adapt Masters of the Universe and make it serious, because it was always very visibly, utterly ridiculous.
Aye, and that was like part of the charm, wasn't it? That was the reason that we all probably loved it. I mean, as a Wayne, you weren't like kind of picking up on the fact that it was really like kind of, I don't know, ridiculous. You were just like, all right, cool, like that's, you know, Beastman's like falling in a puddle and Skeletor's going,
you're bubbling my phones.
Curses.
That's the other thing. I mean, I quite like Mark Hamill as a voice actor, but I do not like his take on Skeletor because it's utterly lifeless. Although, in fairness, he's no get much to work with because Skeletor's dialogue is just completely flat. Like, he's not even, as you said, as I said, he's just not even funny. It's like, how do you make Skeletor not funny? Come on, man.
Yeah.
Alright, so let's move on. Alan, have you been watching anything else on telly that's got your eye lately?
On telly, I started watching Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, which is pretty good.
Oh, you enjoying it?
I'm only like 3 or 4 episodes in, kind of thing, but I'm actually loving it. I've just been watching one at a time, so just kind of pacing myself on it because I'm usually want to binge something and then be like, God damn it, like I've went through it all in like a day and a half, and now I've got nothing else to watch. So I basically just as a little treat to myself, once a day as a present to myself, I'm watching The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel.
Nice.
But yeah, Rachel Brosnahan in The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel is unbelievably adorable, but also like witty as fuck. She's great.
So good, man. Like when I saw it was about a lady wanting to be a stand-up comedian, I was like, why have I not fucking watched this? Like, this is right up my street. And then I started watching it, and it's like, oh, Lenny Bruce is in it as well. That's pretty cool. Like, just
Back from the dead.
Oh yeah, man. Like, dug him up. Just he looks a little stiff. Do you know what I mean? But like, it's.
I mean, I thought they
walked out.
I thought the makers of Better Call Saul were going far out by having Bob Odenkirk play his younger self, but fucking Lenny Bruce, that is playing his 50s self. That's a bold move.
Oi.
An actor called Luke Kirby portrays Lenny Bruce, and he is pretty darn good.
Yeah.
As Lenny Bruce.
Since I brought up Bob Odenkirk, we should just say we are recording this on a day where it was just been announced that Bob Odenkirk collapsed on the set of Better Call Saul.
Oh shit.
So I really hope he's okay. I wish him a speedy recovery, not just because I'm desperate for that Better Call Saul final season, but Bob Odenkirk's an absolute treasure. So yeah, wishing him well.
Do you think it's all that working out he done for nobody?
I was just thinking about that. Unless, in fact, that's a good segue. Unless MD's get any more TV chat, we could move into some film chat. Alan mentioned Nobody, and he and I watched that together a few weeks ago, which is the Bob Odenkirk action movie. Alan,
So good.
How good is it?
Oh, it was amazing. Like, it was the first like 20 minutes or so. I was like, is this just some mad like up to date Death Wish reactionary garbage? Like, have I given them too much credit here? But
I think I had a worry that it was going to be a Liam Neeson type vehicle.
Yeah. And then at one point there's just a complete like Looney Tunes moment, and I was like, right, I'm in. I'm completely on board.
See, I mind looking at you across the room, and we both looked at you, so I went, oh no, this is going to be good.
Yeah. It's just like when you're on the bus and you need to ring the bell to get off, and he's just like wraps a cord around somebody's neck and is just punching them, and every time he punches that person, the bell rings. It's like, please stop the bus.
There's a whole ludicrous fight scene on a bus that is one of the best choreographed fight scenes that I've ever seen, and it is just so utterly ridiculous. We were both absolutely in stitches.
Oh, it's so funny.
Yeah. Quality movie. Odenkirk is amazing in it. He's utterly convincing. I mean, I keep saying this all the time, and I've been saying it ever since Better Call Saul started. Which, Alan, help me out here. Later, we need to get James to watch that shit. But he's become such
I've just started Ringer, so Better Call Saul probably starting
so another
about
10
6
years. But he's become such a great dramatic actor with a real gravitas on screen. He's utterly convincing in just about any role he tackles now, which is incredible. He must have always had those chops, but he was just always the funny guy, and it's incredible to see him branching out this way. But referencing what you said earlier, Alan, for James's benefit and the listeners who haven't seen it, he's in crazy physical shape for this film, Nobody. And I was listening to an interview with him on the Comedy Bang Bang podcast where he was describing his gym routine for like the past year and a half to get into shape. It's like, Jesus Christ, man. I mean, I'm like 20 years younger than Bob Odenkirk. There's no way I can do that. Fuck that noise. So he's in ridiculous shape. And he looks about 20 years younger as well. It's kind of crazy. It's a top movie. I highly recommend it. If you enjoy the likes of John Wick, but with a little bit more of ridiculous humour in it, then
so it's like a John Wink.
Oh.
That's exactly it. I highly recommend it.
So, what other films then have you watched lately, Craig?
Well, I was thinking recently, trying to prep myself for our inevitable end of year podcast, James, in which we get to our top 9s.
You're trying to stress Christmas, Craig, out in advance?
I'm trying to give Christmas Craig an absolute aneurysm by trying to think of the things I might try and jam in. So I have actually watched a few movies this year from this year, which was something we commented on our previous end of year episode, that we ended up not putting together lists of movies because neither of us, we felt, had watched enough movies. I feel like I've kind of made up for that this year. I've been watching quite a lot. So Nobody, certainly, I suspect it'll be in my top 9. It's that enjoyable a movie. You know what? Actually, what else I watched recently, and I know you watched this as well, Alan, was the R.L. Stine Fear Street trilogy on Netflix.
Yes.
Which
really
I found thoroughly enjoyable. It's very loosely based on the R.L. Stine universe, which, if you know anything about, if you were a teenager in the 90s, then
like
you probably read
Goosebumps
one or two. Well, Goosebumps is like the junior version, but the R.L. Stine's Fear Street stuff was like aimed at older teenagers.
We had a conversation about this.
I did not realise that.
We had a conversation about this stuff quite recently, didn't we, Craig? Not in the podcast. We were talking about
did,
like R.L.
yeah.
Stine and Christopher Pike and all the old...
We did, and then a couple of weeks later I saw those movies land and I was like, okay, that's quite weird. I watched the first one expecting nothing. It's a really, really well made movie, really tightly plotted, got great characterization. Would you agree, Alan?
Yeah, quality violence as well. Like there's some...
Yeah, the violence is actually top notch. It's pretty much got everything going for it. And it's a trilogy of movies. Like, they released them, I think, 2 weeks apart, each installment. But effectively it's one movie. It's just split into 3 parts, but each of the parts has a self-contained story in it, but there's a kind of wraparound ongoing story. And the wraparound ongoing story, James, you'll be interested in this, is set in 1994. So you'll be all about this.
I was about to say, and the soundtrack is so 90s that I think I know someone
it's got a super
other than
90s
me
soundtrack,
who will like this.
Oh, I should be all over that.
It's got a great young cast. They all do a really great job. Most of them I didn't recognise, but I thought they were all great. And it's one that, like I was saying about Slasher earlier, it's one of those situations where you don't need to channel this much characterization into this kind of project, because the fans of this genre will enjoy it without it. So it's nice when you get that as, you know, an added extra of, oh no, this characterization is actually really solid and I actually really care for these kids. I hope they survive.
Nice.
Yeah, it's super cool. I think the only actor I really recognise, Gillian Jacobs from Community. She's in it, and wee Sadie Sink, who plays Max in Stranger Things.
Oh yeah, cool.
Who I really like. I think she's a great wee actress. She's got the same sort of energy, for me anyway, like on same sort of presence on screen as Elliot Page at the start of their career. The way that you could tell in their young performances that, oh, this person is going to be a really important actor. I get that same vibe from Sadie Sink. I think she's got a really magnetic presence on screen. She's great in this, although admittedly she is playing a slightly even more surly version of Max from Stranger Things, but hey.
Hey, if you're good at something,
Indeed.
never do it for free.
I also just the other night watched A Quiet Place 2, which they definitely missed a trick by not calling it A Quieter Place.
Quieter Place.
But
I've never even seen the original.
It's really good. Yeah, it is. Believe the hype. It is a good movie. The second one is just as good, and it carries right off from where the first one ended. So it seems pretty seamless, except for the fact, unfortunately, because this happens anytime you cast kids, of course, is that it looks like the kids have visibly aged 3 years overnight. So that's a problem. And it's just not mentioned. And it's clearly setting up for a third one, because the second one ends not even with a cliffhanger. It just ends with a really great character moment for one of the characters. And it's like, and then you start thinking, wait, how are they going to get out of that? Because the peril is no longer the interesting part in the scene. So there'll definitely be a third one, I would think. But if they keep up the quality, I'll happily watch further installments of it.
I'll watch part 3, The Quietest Place of All.
An even quieter place.
Quieter.
So other than that, I've also been catching up on movies that I meant to watch a while back and I never got around to. In fact, Alan, you were around for one of them.
Casablanca, Gone with the Wind.
Yeah.
When we finally get round to watching Parasite. Have you seen Parasite, James?
I've not.
Hey, listeners, let me all tell you about this movie called Parasite that none of you have heard of.
It's underground indie production.
Hot take, it's really good. Like, just, that's my...
Yeah, it actually is properly great. So, yeah, definitely slow on the train for that one, so I'm not going to try and tell any of our listeners how to suck eggs. I'm sure you all know that that's a good movie. If any of you are slower than me in getting around to watching it, then by all means, hurry up and get around to it, because it is a great movie.
Indeed.
I've got a list of movies to watch. I've got a list of Nicolas Cage movies that I've not seen yet to watch. I've got Pig.
Pig is next on my list. Yeah,
Pig's on my list. I've also got. I've still not seen Mandy, and I've got Mandy to watch as well.
You would really enjoy Mandy. That should definitely be on your list.
I wasn't mad on Mandy. I've got to be honest. I didn't really love it, but
right, that's it. I was fired.
Because I think. I bet if I went over the films I've watched this year, if I really thought about it, I'd think of more. But if you asked me off the top of my head to say what new films have I watched this year, I think I could only say Black Widow and Coming to America. And on Borat. So, there's got to be more than that.
What'd you think of Black Widow?
It was alright, wasn't it? I mean,
I enjoyed it.
In terms of movies where normal humans who aren't superheroes can avoid injury when falling off of buildings, it's great.
Yeah.
I mean, there was at least 10 moments in that film where Scarlett Johansson's titular Black Widow should have broken every bone in her body, but it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, it's alright.
Spy thriller.
What these Marvel movies need is more realism.
Yeah. That's it. Give me some Zack Snyder, Marvel movies.
Oh yeah, I watched Army of the Dead as well. Fuck. Was the Snyder Cut this year? It was,
yep.
Wasn't it? I've watched a lot of films this year, actually, and a few of them were good. No, I mean, Black Widow was, it was fine. It's weird because at the moment what Marvel are doing with their Disney Plus shows is they appear to be their Disney Plus shows are the setup for their films, so they'll do the show to lead into the movie. Whereas Black Widow was the opposite. Black Widow was a movie that was just to lead into upcoming Marvel shows.
Yeah, and then obviously Plandemic, sheeple.
But no, I enjoyed it. If you like action movies, go for it.
Pina Coladas.
I thought your man at Stranger Things was really good, though. He was
He is pretty good at most things.
Also, Florence Pugh is the new Black Widow or White Widow.
She is. She's another one.
She was great, actually.
Yeah. She's another one that's got that same vibe I was talking about earlier. It was a shitey horror movie. I forget what it was called. But she was really good in it, and she was obviously really young in it. And I was like, wow, the young lassie's a great actress. And then a couple of years later, suddenly everybody was shouting about her, and I was like, there you go. So
yeah, she's really good. I'm looking forward to her being the new Black Widow. Oh, speaking of Marvel, as we are, I don't know if you heard the rumours about who's going to be, if not the villain, but one of the villains in the Hawkeye show is the Kingpin, played by Vincent D'Onofrio.
Oh shit! No, I did hear that. Actually,
I did not. That's exciting.
This D'Onofrio has not had D'Onofrio of Marvel.
Yeah, Charlie Bitchin' Cox is going to be in Spider-Man: Far From Home. Confirmed in the cast, but not confirmed as Daredevil. But I'm assuming.
Okay, aye. I would assume it would be though. Otherwise, that would be.
Yeah.
Well, it wouldn't be the first time.
I need Daredevil, Spidey team up. That's what I need.
If it's not as Daredevil, it would not be the first time that Marvel has pulled a bullshit bait and switch. Before we move on, by the way, another movie I watched just a couple of days ago, and it was from last year. It's called Host, and it's an hour-long horror movie in the format of a Zoom call. And that might sound either like a great idea or the worst thing you could ever imagine. It's actually really great. And basically a group of friends get online during the pandemic and get on a Zoom call because they can't go out and see each other, and decide to do something adventurous, so they decide to have a seance online.
Social distancing responsibility is good, but the whole messing with the supernatural is probably questionable.
Pretty much.
They go on to www.seance.com and summon a demon.
It's really, really well done, because I feel like when I was looking at the cast, all the characters were named with the actors' real names. So I'm like, I'm not even sure that these people are even actors, but they were great. It was all really convincing.
Pulled a Woody Harrelson, is what you're saying. Like.
So I basically, one of them has a friend who is a medium, and they get her on to introduce them to the spirits, but then something goes wrong and she gets cut off, and then they're all just having a laugh going, well, that lady is crazy, and the other girl saying, no, you just got to give her a chance, she's fine, she's just a bit weird. And then, I'm not going to say anything else except weird things begin to happen, and it uses the format of the Zoom call really intelligently, and I'm not being hyperbolic when I say the last 10 minutes of this film are literally some of the most nerve-shredding shit I've sat through, and I was not expecting it. There's moments where it's just like, I did actually find myself gasping and leaping off my chair. I was like, shit, okay, I did not expect this level of terror.
Wow.
Yeah,
It
it's
sounds
really
like
clever.
like a 21st century update of BBC's Ghostwatch.
Do you know what? I was thinking of Ghostwatch while I was watching it. Yeah, it's a wee bit like that, except the terror just does go off the chain in the last 10-15 minutes. So I highly recommend it.
I still think that the BBC missed a trick by not disappearing Sarah Green after Ghostwatch just to add to the...
Yeah, it would have been worth it.
So you know what we also sometimes talk about in this podcast, Craig?
What's that, James?
We sometimes talk about music, don't we?
I don't think so. Have you got the right podcast?
And I, for one, was super happy last week or the week before to discover that The Knife are back with a new single, which is called Bird/Afraid of You. It's as awesome and weird as you would expect from The Knife. One of my favourite albums of all time is Silent Shout by The Knife, and I can't remember the name of the album they released after that, but I wasn't so hot on that one. But I don't think they've released anything since then. It's definitely been a while. It is such a weird track. It's like a odd kind of like clattery electro calypso song that sounds both like it was recorded on a 4-track at home and also in a really expensive studio. It's hard to explain, but yeah, I would recommend going and checking it out on Spotify or other streaming services, or purchasing it where available.
I'll do that. I'll get it in my lugs.
Other music, Craig.
James.
I know you like a little bit of Genesis.
Tommy Genesis?
Specifically Tommy Genesis.
Wait a minute, James. Is this an episode of Hip Hopriety, the podcast in which we discuss all things hip hop and other rap music and related subgenres?
I think played at a normal pace and a normal tempo, it might be.
Unlike that shit show of previous episode. I'm with you, let's do this.
Cue the music.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Hip Hopriety, the podcast in which we do that thing I just said. James, you wanted to talk about Tommy Genesis, I believe.
Yes, Tommy Genesis' new single, A Woman is a God. Not to be confused with God is a Woman, the Ariana Grande single.
There's a collaboration that needs to happen.
I'd be into that. I would buy
I bet
several
you
copies
would.
of that.
Would you survive that, James?
I don't know if I would, to be honest. I might die if Ariana Grande and Tommy Genesis did a collab. It might kill me.
A Woman is a God is an absolute banger. I really dig it also. I also really liked her previous single, Peppermint, from her upcoming album also. So, yeah, it's cool that she's still around, still doing her thing. I like that she's still making it weird.
I also noticed that I was on her website, because apparently artists still have websites these days.
Yeah, that's it.
I was on her website, and on her website it says listen to my debut album here, and it's her last album. But like World Vision isn't mentioned at all. Was World Vision just a mixtape, or
so this
I
is
just assumed that was her debut album?
This is I feel like a remix of a conversation we had in our previous episode where I was talking about her debut album, even though she's already released at least 3 other projects that are album length. And I do sometimes feel that not only is there a new definition of debut album, but also I do feel that artists sometimes go back and retcon what they decide was their debut album. Because certainly at the time, back in, 2015, when Tommy Genesis dropped World Vision, she definitely described it as her debut album, whereas now it seems to have been relegated to something else.
Yeah, I think it's been relegated to mixtape. which is fine. It's got some of her best tracks on it.
It does,
still,
yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
But
I would be a fan if it were not for that album, because I still think that is her strongest project all the way through, to be honest. But I still love everything she does.
Yep, and yet Goldilocks, however, is being announced as her second album. She released some promotional images from it.
She certainly did. That stopped the internet.
I think I may have seen these. Yeah.
It's hot! Damn hot! Real hot! Hotter than this is my shorts. I can cook things in it. Little crotch pot cooking.
I mean, you know, if you got it, flaunt it, guys. Tommy Genesis isn't he shy?
She's not shying away from her self-created genre of fetish rap.
Right, yeah. I like that she's still battering away on that particular drum.
Yep, and her flow remains totally original and weird and great.
It's really off the beat and very irregular, and I know I've said this to you before, James, but I don't think we've discussed it on the podcast really. She is still one of my favourite MCs, just in terms of her flow alone is just so strange that it's the kind of thing I know a lot of old hip-hop heads listen to and go, oh, she just can't rap. And I'm like, you're just not listening properly. She can rap. She just can't rap in the old school way or chooses not to. I think that she does such clever things around the beat that are just so off the wall that it's almost impossible to impersonate. I remember a few years ago, actually, one of my favourite things to do was make memes as... in the form of Tommy Genesis raps, and just try. You remember some of those where I just used to have passages of text describing things I was doing in my day, but here it is in the voice of Tommy Genesis, and it would just be the words syncopated in a really bizarre way. So yeah, I've always been fond of her not being able to rap, quote unquote rapping. I think it's actually pretty ingenious.
I'm excited for this album, not gonna lie.
Well, there you go. Is there anything else hip-hop related since we're in an episode of F-hip-hop-riety?
On a sort of spin-off from this, though, after listening multiple times to our new single, because I had it on repeat when I was going to the shops, because it bumps so much. It's good walking around music as well. But I went on a big sort of Tommy Genesis re-listen, and I was listening to World Vision again. And I went on like a sort of Awful Records kind of deep dive after that, you know, I was kind of scrolling through it. And it really made me just sad that, where's Abra? You know, I want more Abra.
I know, she's not released a project in quite a long while, and she actually she announced one like 2 years ago, and then it just never materialised. I don't know why. Incidentally, by the way, where you can see Abra is in the movie Assassination Nation, directed by Sam Levinson. Did we watch that together, Alan? Was that a movie we watched way back a couple of years ago? Assassination Nation? Yeah. It's a really enjoyable movie, and Abra is pretty decent in it. So, fantastic. You know, she might have another career as an actor. but yeah, I would definitely like, I mean, her take on that sort of slightly late 80s infused part disco, part R&B mashup that she does is pretty great, and she has one of those voices that's pretty infectious.
Her voice is unbelievable. I was just like, I was bumping the album Rose many times in a row.
It's a really great
the other
album.
day last week, and just so good. But no, other than that, I can't think of any other hip-hop news.
I am really digging this week the EP Under 25 by Eny. That's E-N-N-Y. Eny is a young MC / vocalist from London. She's got a really great style where her music is that sort of grey area between modern R&B and UK hip-hop. There are some throwbacks in it stylistically, but you know how much I love when an MC has a very particular vocal style and vocal quality, like when they've got a lot of sort of idiosyncrasies in the way they just enunciate words. Eny has that in spades, and she's a really smart lyricist. I first saw her she guested on a Georgia Smith song earlier in the year. She's one of those people that looks really cool as well, and I was like, oh, she's really deep. I'm really into her. I wonder what she's going to be up to. And then she didn't release anything for a while. I followed her on Spotify because I do that a lot. As soon as I think, oh, that person's got an interesting voice or whatever, I'll think if they might pop up at some point having released something. And then she dropped this EP just last week, and it's pretty great, and I highly recommend it. If you like UK hip hop and you like UK R&B and you like the fusion in between, She's doing some really interesting things with it, and as I say, lyrically, she's really on point. So yeah, that's my recommendation for this edition of F Hip Propriety. Alan, while you're here, have you listened to the new Vince Staples?
I have not. No. I was listening to one of his other albums the other day, just that did not realise that he had anything new out, so I will add that. I'm currently adding any to my list at the moment, so...
He's released a new quote-unquote album, and I'm saying quote-unquote because Vince Staples done this thing for the past few releases where he's basically released EPs and calling them albums. I don't know what's going on anymore,
Up
guys.
as down, black as white, dogs and cats living together.
But this thing is like 25 minutes long, and he's calling it an album. It's like, come on, Vince. You can do better than this, man.
If I was going to HMV and paying 14 quid for that back in the day, I'd have been raging 25 minutes.
But I will say this about Vince Staples, I feel like he's becoming less and less of an easy listen as he gets older, which I'm fine with. Like, everyone, his last couple of releases, I've not immediately loved them on my first listen, and I've been like, I'll get around to listening to that again at some point. And then I go back and listen to it maybe months later, and I go, oh no, this is actually better than I thought. And then I'll listen to it maybe another month later, and I go, holy shit, this is really great. And it just takes a while to creep up on me. Like Summertime '06, his big full-length album, is, I think, still his strongest piece of work, but that was an immediate love affair with that album. As soon as I heard that, I was all over it, and I've not had that experience with anything he's released since. But as I say, every one of them is a slow grower, so I suspect the same might happen with this recent release as well. So I get it in your lugs at some point and see what you think. The other release, this is not hip hop related, it's more in the vein of R&B, but since this is a fusion episode, I'm just going to dump this in here. I'm really digging the new release by Salt, SAULT, who are a UK R&B soul troupe who are like very secretive. Like, they never release photos of themselves, they never do any interviews with press or anything, and they've released in the last couple of years 4 albums, and all of them are amazing. Every track is great, very rich, a lot of kind of throwbacks to the classic 70s soul sound, but with a very modern sensibility. Lyrically as well, very rewarding, very rich stuff. Although a friend of mine did remark to me something that did make me laugh, because they meant it as an insult, and I went, haha, that's totally true. Some of the songs sound like they belong on Sesame Street.
You know what, right? Anyone who hasn't checked out the F Sobriety podcast jukebox on Spotify, compiled by Craig, which contains every song that is even so much as referenced in an episode of F Sobriety, it's absolutely worth your time. But the previous episode, when Alan mentioned Sesame Street, when I was editing it, I was going to throw the Sesame Street theme tune in the background, but instead I went for the classic 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah. And I didn't know it was the Pointer Sisters that did that until I looked on the jukebox. I was like, holy shit.
Yeah, back in the day, Sesame Street had all the best musicians doing their stuff.
I was today years old when I realised this as well. That's amazing.
Yeah, I do not apologise for how obsessive I am with compiling the playlist, guys. Anybody who knows me knows I'm very obsessive when it comes to playlists. So if you're a listener to this podcast and you really want to check out either my level of psychosis where this is concerned, or you really just want to catch up on just how many pieces of music have been referenced on this podcast, then dig in.
Golden Girls theme tune.
That's it. Alan's just going to start saying stuff. It's become a test.
And that wraps it up for another edition of F Hip Propriety.
Toodle pip pop.
Good app.
Good app, yeah. So another thing we sometimes talk about is what we've soaked up on social media. I will freely admit at this point, you might have noticed, James, and you might have noticed, Alan, but for the past week I've not been very active because I'm kind of fatigued with social media, largely because the last time I was on social media a week or so ago or just over, I spent some time unfollowing a lot of liberal US celebrities who are effectively spreading imperialist propaganda with the SOS Cuba hashtag, and I thought, I can't take this anymore. And so, continuing the theme of last week's discussion, the perils of engaging in popular culture while leftist. All I'll say is this. One of the things that also makes me laugh is when conservatives say that leftists live in an echo chamber. I'm like, mate, do you understand how many of my favourite artists are actually just centrist liberals, and how fucking insane that drives me. And then when shit like this happens and they all start parroting a hashtag that's basically geared towards trying to get the US to intervene, quote unquote intervene in Cuba, because we all know how great regime change works when the US is in charge.
And they've been so standoffish with Cuba over the last 60 years as well.
Right, aye, exactly. The fact that join the dots, people. The reason Cuba is going through what it's going is largely because of an embargo caused by the US.
Yeah, the United States has got its foot on Cuba's neck and is saying, look, it can't breathe, someone needs to help it.
Right,
While
exactly.
the rest of the UN are saying, stop standing on its neck.
I don't want to make an fDemocracy of this, but I do just want to say this real quick. I understand some people listen to this podcast, and a lot of you might be liberals, you might not be leftists. I think we're uncommon in the podcast landscape talking about popular culture, where we just openly talk about things from a explicitly left-wing perspective and not a liberal perspective. So all I'll say is, and I'm not attacking anybody, but I will say this: if you are a liberal and you entertain ideas of being progressive, but you're still falling for the line that the problem of Cuba can somehow be solved by a US intervention, there's two things I would say about that. First of all, the problem with Cuba is not for you to decide how to solve, particularly when, you know, we as Western subjects, we all live in a part of the world where we're effectively giving our permission for the US empire to do what it does unless we stand up against it. And if you're spreading that hashtag SOS Cuba, then you're not doing that. You're actually doing the opposite, because that's exactly what the US war machine wants. They want an excuse to be able to go in there and do whatever they want with Cuba, so that they can essentially just remold it in their own shitty neoliberal capitalist imperialist image. And regardless of what anybody thinks about Cuba and the Cuban regime, and I will openly say I nominally support the Cuban regime in terms of supporting it against US imperialism. That does not mean I think it's perfect by any means, but I do think that for any socialist country, it's impossible to reach its potential when it's suffering under the stranglehold of US imperialism. And anybody who's joining in the whole hashtag SOS Cuba is really just joining in a campaign for the US to do whatever it wants. And the question I would just pose to you is, even if you believe all the worst possible things about the Cuban regime, where in the history of the US has any kind of intervention ever worked out well for that country? In what reality could a US intervention actually achieve anything better than what you think is wrong with Cuba? Because I think there's a deafening silence to that question. And therefore, I think the only thing anybody, certainly anybody who considers themselves on the left, and if you're a liberal, I would compel you, please, to think about this also, is that you really should be supporting the Cuban people. And there's this propaganda campaign that the US is trying to make you think that supporting the Cuban people means supporting a few protests of a few thousand people. If you applied that same logic to the US, where there were mass demonstrations in favour of Black Lives Matter, that means, you know, another country should be able to come along and say, well, maybe what the US needs is regime change. Would you be in favour of that? Because that's what you're dealing with.
Well, to be fair, back in January, some of them were.
But exactly, and that's what you would get instead. And as much as the US is a shit show, what you would get is much worse. For other countries around the world, the US is that shit show. Because the US is the global empire that's imposing neoliberal economics on the rest of the world, and it needs to fucking stop if the planet has any future and people have any future. So yeah, fuck imperialism. Socialism is actually a good thing. I'm not going to apologise for championing it. That's just what I do here and throughout my daily life. If that's a problem, oh well. But socialism in Cuba has been a good thing for the world, by and large. And just to reiterate, whatever problems I, or indeed anyone in the West, or criticisms we might have about the Cuban regime, we need to sort out our own fucking shit first, considering how much of our own governments are contributing to the situations that make whatever is bad about Cuba and other similar countries persist. And that's my final note on that. But the only reason I mentioned it was because that was my last action on social media, was let's unfollow a bunch of celebrities who are spreading US imperialist propaganda. So that's been my social media update. More like socialist media.
by the way, it's also hijacking the SOS Columbia hashtag and
Yes, good
cheapening
point.
it, etc.
Yeah.
So,
And SOS Columbia, that is a legitimate hashtag, and that actually is supporting a pro-democracy movement in Colombia against, incidentally, a dictatorship supported by the United States. All right, anyway, I think that has been an episode of fDemocracy. Cue the music.
Toodle pip, comrade.
Good ep.
Spiral. Good ep.
Been a while since I had a rant on here, so you knew it was coming eventually.
That guy sure knows about socialism, doesn't he?
And the good news for you Twin Peaks fans who skipped past all of it, you did not have to hear a single word. Congrats. On that note, guys, is it time to return to the return?
Let's talk Twin Peaks: The Return, Part 5, Case Files. We begin with black and white clouds on a Rancho Rosa logo. This is a thing I forgot that I was going to be looking at, but I was going to take note of every Rancho
different
Rosa
colours?
logo.
Ah,
Yeah.
Okay.
This one's a black and white cloud, which reminds us of Part 8, even though we haven't seen Part 8 yet. It looks a little bit like the explosion in
Foreshadows,
Part
if you
8.
will.
Indeed. Before we see that this episode, like every episode, was written by Mark Frost and David Lynch and directed by David Lynch.
It's good to remind the listeners, they might have forgotten.
And after that oh so familiar warm bath of the Twin Peaks theme tune, we come in with blunted beats in Vegas.
Yeah, blunted beats. We get used to that. We're going to be hearing lots of it. I do enjoy the Las Vegas skyline we get here, the street vista. It looks lush and it looks beautiful, but it also looks utterly artificial in that way that Las Vegas can only ever look. Apologies to listeners in Las Vegas.
Yeah, you have a lovely home. Like,
So yeah, we get the shipman, Gene, and the other guy, calling Lorraine, tell him they missed Dougie, not realising that Cooper escaped thanks to the magic key as discussed in the previous episode. So we get the blunted beats. Lorraine, who described as a warrior.
And she should be worried.
She does the most perplexing thing here, James. Alan. She types in Argent 2. And we get 2 beeps on a box in a darkened room, which we will see later at the end of this episode. Or is it the end of the next episode?
I said the next episode.
The next episode, yeah. The box is in Buenos Aires, Argentina.
Shout out to Argentina.
Shout out to our listeners in Argentina.
It's weird that we can say listeners, plural.
I feel like there is more than one, yeah.
I'm going to shout out to our original listener in Argentina, specifically though, if you're
Yeah,
listening.
for starting that trend.
Thank you for your service.
And for long-time fans of Twin Peaks who are very into the lore and very into the behind-the-scenes, we all knew that Buenos Aires had a certain relevance because we knew from the missing pieces that Philip Jeffries is in a hotel in Buenos Aires when he is zapped over to the Philadelphia offices during that very confusing scene in Fire Walk With Me.
Ayatame.
Or as some subtitler had it.
Are you the man?
Are you the man? Some subtitler who did not understand Spanish, thus confusing a lot of Twin Peaks fans who watched with the subtitles and spawned a raft of very exotic theories about what "Are you the man" might mean. It means nothing, everyone. He was saying "Ayúdame."
But
Anyway.
this little beeping box in Buenos Aires, although we don't see the result of it until the end of next episode, is one of my favourite pieces of Lynch tech / Black Lodge tech. The weirdness of it is so good.
Yeah, it's pretty great. And again, this is one of those things that is never explained. We don't know what this box is, what it even signifies. We are left just with our minds to wander around what the possibilities might be.
it's provocative.
Yeah. But we don't even have time to wonder what this little box is because we're whisked away to South Dakota to Buckhorn for a Constant Talbot stand-up show over the body of Major Briggs.
Somebody erect a red brick wall in this morgue so Constance
Funny
can
thing
stand
about
against
dead
it.
bodies, am I right?
I just gave you the headline, which is my favourite line in here. Jane Addams is an absolute treasure. And this is it's this kind of content that makes me so happy that Lynch cast her in this. I'll be happy for. She was always one of those actors I thought she would be great in a Lynch thing. So the fact that she turned up here is just so great. She's perfect in this role.
And they find, of course, and what we don't know for sure yet, but I'm sure we were all suspecting at the time, because at the time I know that you and I both suspected, oh, this is Major Briggs's body. Mm-hmm. And what they find is Dougie's wedding ring inside Major Briggs.
Right. And speaking of conundra that are never quite resolved, we never really find out how Dougie's wedding ring gets inside Major Briggs's body. I have still not quite been able to square that circle, square that ring, if you will.
I'm thinking Dougie went on a crazy bender and, this is how he actually literally blew Major Briggs's mind. Like that's...
Like, presumably Major Briggs would have to have got it somehow. Or Doppel Cooper got it somehow and put it in Briggs's body.
And Major Briggs definitely got it.
Those are the only two scenarios that make any sense, but I don't understand how the logistics of them work.
I assume Doppelkoop has easy access to it. I assume he knew where Dougie was at all times.
But how long?
Given that he created him.
Is that why Janey-E is so pissed off that years ago Dougie lost their wedding ring? It's
entirely possible. Yeah,
I guess that is possible.
I mean, she's got multiple reasons to be pissed off at Dougie, as Alan mentioned last episode. But
there is an endlessly lengthening list. That is true.
That woman is a saint.
She totally is, and obviously, what is it she's described as in the next episode?
Tough dame.
Tough dame. But skipping ahead, and obviously should be doing that, but my favourite parts are becoming all the parts with Janey-E, Sonny Jim, and Dougie Jones.
And the rest of the cast of the Waltons.
It's just so wholesome now, like every part of it, like it's just like it's seedy and disgusting, like what Dougie actually was and what he did to that entire family, but just everything about it now is just really, it's just nice, like, and every time it goes back to that red door, you're just like,
yeah.
The whole scenario with the Joneses gives me sort of Coen Brothers vibes, but it's a Coen Brothers film that we don't get to see because we have to imagine it for ourselves. Dougie Jones just being out to some shady shit, and Janey being his long-suffering wife.
Yeah, it's the backstory to a season of Fargo.
Dougie Jones being the William H. Macy type character. Yeah, right, exactly.
And the two guys who show up to get the money, that was going through my head as well. It's like something from a Coen Brothers film. Just be like,
right, it's a delete scene from The Big Lebowski.
Yeah. Nevertheless, he owes. No.
So we segue from there to Yankton Prison, where this is where we need to decide what that jingle's going to be, James, for the keeping track of where the meta things are in Twin Peaks: The Return.
Well, whatever we decide it's going to be, it's going to drop right now.
What's the matter, you? Hey! It doesn't matter.
Oh, good choice.
I thought so. Well done, future James.
Into it.
Top marks. So we get Doppel Cooper effectively directing the scene, lying back in his cot in the cell, and he says, "And now, food is coming." Now, I don't know about you, but I cannot ever not find this hilarious, the way he enunciates, "and now."
It's so good. It's like Monty Python-esque. Here's the thing.
It's clobbering time.
When Coop says, "and now, food is coming," and then the food comes, it reminded me of the original series when Lucy buzzes through and Coop snaps and says, "Are Albert and his team here?"
Oh, good. That's a good catch. Yeah.
And there's another moment where that happens as well, like when he's in the hotel and he, when he's in the Great Northern and he whistles and goes,
yes,
and then the door goes.
That's right. The phone rings after he whistles.
Oh, the phone rings. Yeah.
Yeah, he's always had that sort of sixth sense. Yeah, that is a good call, actually. But is there a way in which you can interpret even Cooper's original sixth sense as being a wee bit meta? Not to go into the twin perfect of it all. About the original Twin Peaks itself being meta. I'm definitely not going down that rabbit hole, don't worry. No, really. Yeah, I don't know, but it's an interesting thing to think about. But I do feel like, because the way that Doppelcooper projects this just feels like such a stage direction. I mean, in the script, if you read that line, it does feel like he is just saying to himself that it's like he's effectively saying, okay, I know what's happening here. Nothing here can surprise me. Mm-hmm. But who the fuck is he talking to? He's not saying it for anybody's benefit except ours. You know what I mean?
Maybe this also adds credence to your, and I guess you could say, our ongoing theory that this is all taking place in one moment in Coop's memories. Mm-hmm. That this is Cooper thinking, right, and now food comes.
Yes, I think that also tracks. Yep, I'm into it.
Also, he's kind of like, he is talking to Bob like in the mirror a little bit after that. So like, could it be that he's having the whole conversation?
That is another possibility, yeah. And maybe it has a double meaning in that sense. Maybe because Doppelcooper knows what his own plans are, so he's trying to reassure Bob and saying, oh no, more pain and sorrow is coming further down the line. Don't worry.
You're going to get that garmonbozia. That cream corn is going to be all over you. There is one more moment in this episode next episode I should say actually, that upon rewatch while we've been talking about it from the perspective of everything happening as like a moment in Coop's memory and imagination, that jumped out at me where I was like, oh, now I see this completely differently, but we'll come to that later.
Okay, cool.
But in the meantime, the food comes.
We get this immortal moment where Doppelcooper looks into the mirror. And I remember just wetting my pants during this scene the first time I saw it. We get the flashback to Doppelcooper together with Bob in the Black Lodge from the season 2 finale. And the way that's edited is just so disturbing. Like, the point in the footage at which Lynch chooses to loop it is... It's easy to miss it, so it does look like it's just continuing for far too long rather than being a loop. And another editing choice he makes here that I think is really effective is when you see Cooper in the bathroom smashing his face into the mirror, he takes a millisecond out of Cooper smashing his face in, so it seems like the impact hits way harder. Yeah. And it's a really interesting editing choice. And of course, again, it's the classic Lynch sound design. It sounds like 1,000 mirrors smashing, because Lynch is never subtle about this kind of thing. But it's amazing. The first time I saw this, it just gave me such chills.
It didn't make me like it was the first time that confirmed for me that it was like, of course, Bob's there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I know that the quote-unquote Philip Jeffries on the phone had said, I will be with Bob again, but we hadn't seen Bob. We knew Frank Silva had sadly passed before the making of this season. Yeah. Didn't expect to see any Bob in this.
I did not know that, so...
He died a long time ago, actually. He died in 1995. So, only a few years after Fire Walk With Me. And he died from complications from AIDS. So, he was one of that lost generation. Very sad. If you ever see interviews with Frank Silva, he seems like the loveliest human being.
He does.
He's so wholesome, and it's so jarring. Particularly when you grew up knowing him as Bob, and then you go back and you see these videos on YouTube, and as that part of your kind of adolescent self is reeling, going, "No, this does not compute." But he seems like he was such a lovely person.
He seemed like the sort of person who loved the fans as well. He loved the whole fan base and stuff around Twin Peaks.
And he loved being the villain. Like I think it was one of those things where it was so unlike his own personality that he loved just getting to play that role and just kind of being an actor and being something that you're not, he seemed to really revel in it. But sad that he wasn't around. But you're right, that was one of the things we really kind of theorised about beforehand, is how are they going to handle Bob? Are we even going to see Bob? I mean, it was a big question. I remember in some of our conversations with the Tron, not the Hamiltron, the other one.
The Hamilton, the other one, yep.
We started wondering, is it possible they could even recast Bob? And then we started thinking about ways, or what if somebody replaces Bob? We had all these exotic theories. What if Leland replaces Bob? What if Leland is the new Bob, essentially? We had all that kind of shit going on in our heads, but no. Lynch and Frost essentially did something way simpler. It says they retained Bob, but they are essentially making Doppelcooper the bigger bad, which is kind of terrifying.
The visual effect of his face slightly turning into Bob was really good.
It's one of the best digital effects in this whole series, I think. And it's that classic Bob sneer, the way it just slowly leeches across his face is really disturbing.
I like that they did that instead of it just being like a straight, he looks in the mirror and it's Bob, you know, there's
Right,
just a little morphing element that shows you that it's a partnership rather than a possession.
Right, and Bob is kind of along for the ride, and Doppel Cooper seems to enjoy that he's there because, you know, his words are, "You're still with me, that's good." We don't know why that's good, but Doppel Cooper seems assured that he's still there. It's funny because back in the days of the old series, the transitions between Leland and Bob were always a bit more clunky, and now they look a wee bit cartoonish. Although, admittedly, I don't feel they've lost that much of their power, in all honesty. But they were a bit more... On the Damn Fine TV podcast, Jasmine and Mel's always describe it as David Lynch's clip art. Whenever they have... David Lynch has that thing from back in the 90s where he would just superimpose somebody else's face over somebody, and it looks naff as hell. But, you know, it does the job. Like, he does the same thing in Lost Highway by putting the Mystery Man's face over Patricia Arquette at a certain point. And it's like, that is a really naff effect, but I guess it gets the effect. But yeah, it's interesting to see they chose something a bit more advanced for this scene.
Do you think someone else maybe took him aside and went, "We're not doing that one that you usually
Listen,
like,
David, you know,
right?"
Did you know special effects have advanced in 25 years?
What the hell?
Then we got one of my favourite scenes, I think, in the whole show, which is the brief but brilliant return of Mike.
I don't have the words for how much I love this brief scene. Shout out to Mike Nelson, one of the OG characters, and it's so cool seeing him here. Let's break it down. Mike, of course, when we first knew him in the original show, he started off as an absolute arsehole. He was effectively Bobby's right-hand man in the drug trade and all the seedy goings-on at the high school. The worst boyfriend ever to Donna. And then in the second half of the original show, he becomes the suitor to... He mellows by becoming the suitor to superpowered Nadine's born-again 18-year-old act. We have to remind ourselves when we see these things out loud, yes, Season 2 of Twin Peaks was an absolute ride. And so to see him here, grown up as a middle-aged man, having this moment where, let's be real about it, he's looking at Stephen's CV, he's looking at Stephen, and he's seeing himself. And he's thinking, dude, straighten yourself out, man.
I literally did not click that was Mike until just now. When you were saying that, I was going,
holy
did you see
shit.
Mike? Honestly, I was like, oh, I can't believe I missed it.
But it's interesting you say that, because at the time this aired, I remember a load of people online were saying they didn't recognise him, and I was like, how could you not recognise him? He's just Mike, he looks the same. But apparently, you're not alone, Alan. A lot of people did not recognise Gary Hershberger as Mike in this scene.
I've watched that episode twice in the last 2 days. Like, I watched them both yesterday, and I watched them both again today, and I still did not pick up that was Mike. Like, what an asshole.
His delivery of that line is just so perfect, because you know at the same time he's looking back at himself and going, oh, what an asshole. Although I think there's a double thing here again, because is Mike the manager at this, what is he, a car salesman essentially?
Looks like a car showroom, doesn't it?
Car lot, yeah. Is he even that much less of an arsehole? I mean, we don't see enough of him to be sure, but I was getting kind of what's the name, Daniel San.
Oh yeah,
and Cobra Kai type vibes. Which, for the benefit of MD's not watched that show, the idea is that Daniel San from the original Karate Kid has kind of lost touch with who he was when he was younger, and has kind of become a bit of an ass, and he runs a car lot.
LaRusso Auto.
LaRusso, that's the name I couldn't remember.
The adverts having karate shopping prices and stuff. Every sale gets a free bonsai tree.
Yeah, what we need is the Twin Peaks spin-off directed by David Lynch, in which Bobby and Mike start a rivalry with Big Ed, and they both have to go to different dojos and then fight against each other.
Whoever gets Nadine wins, let's be honest.
It's Mike's Chevrolet dealership versus Big Ed's gas farm for Nadine's heart.
Bobby can turn up and say, don't take any oink oink off that grease monkey, Mr. Monkey Wrench.
Take that, Mr. Monkey Wrench.
How they've all grown. But it's a beautiful moment. I want to shout out as well. Caleb Landry Jones, amazing casting in this role, because
He's such a piece of shit.
that guy is a great actor, but for his sins, he has been endlessly typecast as the worst pieces of shit of all time. Just because, I'm sorry, Caleb Landry Jones, you just have that look about you.
Yeah, seedy
But
as hell.
He's a great actor. He's actually, even in the... Do you know what I like about him? Even in these roles that he gets typecast as, he's still got range within those roles. And he's always compelling to watch. There's something about Stephen that's he's another one of those characters that he seems very much on the spectrum, like very high, because he just seems incapable of really engaging with people in an ordinary conversation. Like, he seems incapable of reading people. Like, even the fact, surely he must be aware on some level his CV is terrible, but he just walks in nonchalantly, goes, "All right, great." It's like, no, not great.
I think it's just because he's high off his tits on Sparkle.
Well, there is that, so that's certainly not helping. No, he's perfectly cast in this role, because I can... You remember that line in part 2 where one of Shelley's girlfriends tells her, "Oh, everybody loves Stephen." I think in a weird way you can sort of understand why some people might like him. He does have a certain weird charm about him. Even though he's a bit weird looking, he's also quite a handsome guy, and I think if you look at him with a certain sort of distance, you might think, he's a bit of a lovable rogue. But when you're closer to him, you're like, no, this guy is horrible. This guy is the absolute worst.
He is the Leo to Becky's Shelley, but at least
Yes,
Leo had a fucking job. You know what I mean?
Well, there's that, yeah.
Personally attacked by that one, but okay.
Admittedly, Leo's job was being a drug dealer.
Yeah,
But still.
quote-unquote trucking.
We're going to get real parochial here, right, about Glasgow music from a certain era of the mid-2000s. But there's something about Stephen really reminds me of Scott Patterson from Sons and Daughters.
I can kind of see that,
Sons and Daughters, Glasgow band from the 2000s, look them up. It just always reminds me of that guy. And every time I see him on screen, I'm just like, what happened to you, Scott?
Caleb Landry Jones, incidentally, just a couple of weeks ago, he won the Best Actor Award at Cannes, for a movie in which he is cast as the Australian mass murderer Martin Bryant. And I'm like, yeah, if there's any role he's going to win an award for, that sounds like the one.
Someone put him in a rom-com immediately. We traverse over to the station.
Yep. Back to all the feels, all the wholesome feels. God, I love this place. It's the only police station I'll ever feel warm about.
We sort of get the only appearance we're going to get of Sheriff Harry Truman.
Oh, yeah, and it's over the phone. My hand is reaching to F.
Yeah.
Because Harry might still be with us, but I don't know for how much longer he's still with us. I really appreciate that they did this, though, that Frost and Lynch chose to do this. Because, for the benefit of any listeners who don't know, and maybe Alan, if you don't know, Michael Ontkeen was originally cast to come back as Sheriff Harry Truman. At a certain point, he seems to have changed his mind for some reason. For full background, Michael Ontkeen has been retired for quite a few years. And I think he has had health problems in the past, and he's lived in Hawaii now for a long time. And so I think, reading between the lines, he thought, going back to do this in the freezing cold of the Pacific Northwest, maybe I just won't bother. But he was originally meant to come back, and then at some point along the way, it was announced that was no longer happening. But I like the fact that Frost and Lynch kept him part of the story, even if it was unseen. Now, I've seen some people online say some along the lines of, I feel like it's a wee bit cruel that they've kept him out of sight, but they've made him possibly deathly ill. That seems like a real knife in the side. And I can understand that, but I think what I would also say is that adds a really powerful dimension to what's going on in The Return generally. There is, of course, that view that the Twin Peaks that we see in The Return is a much darker and bleaker place. We've already had the conversation in previous episodes that The Return is edging closer to the real world. It's like it's ripping the old town back into something more akin to the real world. And in the real world, your favourite people, sometimes terrible things do happen to them.
These couple episodes really pile the misery on per Truman, though.
They do, yeah. This whole nexus around Twin Peaks generally in the next few episodes, there's a lot gets piled on here that's like, man, what happened to this place? But the answer is, this place that we're seeing on screen is no bleaker than anywhere we know in real life. Tragedy hits all of us at some point. And every single, all of you, we all live in the general Glasgow area. There's plenty of shit going on in Glasgow.
I thought you were going to start singing a Beatles song there.
We're all accustomed to varying degrees of tragedy and hardship and learning about shitty things that happen to good people. There's nothing particularly unusual about this, really. The only reason it seems harsh is because Harry was such a beloved character from the original series. I think there's another way of looking at it, though, that it's actually quite hopeful that we don't learn of Harry's fate. And Frank even has that line on the phone to Harry where he says, "Beat this thing." And it's like, well, maybe he did. We're left to wonder about it. But yeah, it certainly does make things a lot more tragic.
Even more so when we meet Harry's wife. Not Harry's wife, sorry. Brother.
Frank's wife, Doris.
Frank's wife.
When we first meet Doris, it seems like she's introduced for sort of as a comedy nag, and it's like even at the time, it's like poor Frank, he's got a pure nagging wife, and it's not till the next episode that you're like, oh shit.
This is one of the things that I had misgivings about the first time I saw this episode, because I was like, really, David Lynch, do we need any more women as shrews archetypes? Can you not just rein this in? Also, bearing in mind, I did not feel at this point that Janey-E had been fleshed out enough, so I was feeling like there's a bit too much men getting a hard time from their wives going on.
The old ball and chain. Her indoors.
Right. Now,
Exactly.
the ensuing episodes do correct that, so I was eventually appeased where that was concerned. But it was a concern for me in this scene where Candy Clark just turns up and literally is crazy in Frank's face for a good 5 minutes. And Frank, he's just completely static. He's completely impassive, like nothing phases him. And that also bothered me. I'm like, okay, so in this universe, the men are always all cool all the time. And it's just the women who are crazy. But we might as well skip ahead and just mention this because it is relevant to the scene. In the scene towards the end of the next episode, where we get the explanation from Maggie the Dispatcher about what happened to their son, you start to realise, I think, that actually Frank has got just as much a problem as Doris does. Because Frank, that's an act. He cannot possibly be impassive, because if that happens to you, you're broken inside. And Frank's way of dealing with being broken inside is to shut off his emotions, which I feel like on a certain level the show is also making us think about that and saying, actually that's not a healthy way of dealing with things.
No, that's like Toxic Masculinity 101
yes, absolutely.
right there.
Yeah. But we'll speak more about that scene when we get there, because there's definitely more to say about it. But this scene with Doris, it's a powerhouse performance by Candy Clark. She really goes for it.
There is no scenery left unchewed by the time she's done.
Yeah, there's no walls left standing. And that line of, "We're gonna get that black mold, Frank." It's just, the delivery is so ludicrous that it's a classic Lynch kind of performance where it's just on that edge of being completely, utterly unbelievable, but at the same time there's that part, he's like, you know what, I'm sure I've seen someone act that ridiculous in a situation before. So
I think it was Dennis Hopper in Blue Velvet.
Yes, yeah. Well, that's definitely an extreme example. We don't know how murderous Doris might be outside of the scene. Who knows?
I mean, you wouldn't mind seeing Doris murdering Chad,
Yeah.
The thing is, whenever I think about this line, and she has that line, I always think to myself, she's going to say, "We're going to get that Black Lodge, Frank." I can never get it out of my head. I always feel like that's where she's going. Some of the things she says here, I think, are quite interesting on a metaphorical level, because she talks about she has to go a full day with a leaking pipe, and there's this inference that Twin Peaks is sort of falling apart from the inside, that things are rotting away literally, and the whole mention of the black mold, like, it sort of makes me think of the way in which darkness is sort of seeping into this place in a way that maybe wasn't quite before, that Doppelcooper is approaching and everything he represents is getting that bit closer. And also, it also chimes with, I think, the kind of themes that we were talking about in our previous episode with Mark Frost's introduction of the track housing in Las Vegas, was introducing that socio-political dimension where a lot of people who work for a living are nonetheless in shitty living situations when they really should be able to afford something better,
Yep, Janey-E in the next episode really goes for it. That
yes.
I feel like that's 100% Mark Frost there. I don't think any of that was David Lynch's writing.
No, ditto.
He's like, what's a 99%?
What? Who's the other 1% then? Mark's just like, fuck up, David. Right? Go and put more soil on a table.
Go smoke another 20 fags. That's cigarettes in this part of the world for North
Another
American listeners.
beautiful day.
I feel like in the next episode there's one bit where I was just like, you go Mark Frost, you go, but we'll get to that.
Another side note I noted here, when Doris is talking about her dad's car, Frank says someone named Sammy had a look at it, and I'm like, well, what's wrong with Big Ed?
Yeah.
Isn't he the best mechanic in town? What's going on? And part of me started to think, did you take it to a shittier mechanic deliberately? But maybe that's me getting too paranoid.
Maybe someone called Sammy works for Big Ed.
I would imagine so. Yeah, there can't be more than one gas farm in Twin Peaks. I can imagine Everett Big Hill delivering the line, this town ain't big enough for 2 gas farms.
Vegas, baby!
So Dougie Cooper is going to get himself to work. Okay, now, this entire sequence. Can we just ask the question, what the fuck is wrong with Janey-E? How does she not realise that this man cannot possibly function at anything, let alone going to work? Like, what the hell?
In Janey-E's defence, she does say, I should probably take you to the doctor.
Yeah, maybe you should do that, like, right now.
Maybe you should have done that 2 days ago or whatever. Like,
The moment where she says, you're acting weird as shit, Dougie, I'm like,
Yeah.
You just
Okay,
noticed.
a moment here, though, that is really affecting is when Cooper is looking in at the car at Sonny Jim, and he just has that tear that rolls down his face.
Tears of a clown. I thought Tears of a Clown would get a bigger laugh, I'm not going to lie. I'm going to cut that out.
I'm sorry, my tone is far too serious for this, because I'm thinking of classic Cooper lying on the floor of his hotel room in the season 2 premiere, bleeding out as he talks to Diane, saying, I hope one day I'm still able to raise a family, despite everything I've been through. It's something I hope I can still do. That's what I'm thinking about when he's looking at Sonny Jim and crying.
I didn't even think back to that. I was too busy laughing at my own jokes.
Well, that'll learn you, Hamilton.
Sad thing is, like, obviously, Cooper doesn't raise a family. I mean, Doppelcoop has a kid,
Right.
and Dougie Jones has a kid, but
Yes.
no kids for Coop.
Yeah, and this is kind of a theme. Like, both Coopers that have spawned children have been extremely terrible fathers. So yeah, it's a very sad story all around for classic Cooper where that's concerned. So Janey-E does mention here the amount of money that Cooper won. It's $425,000, not to be sniffed at.
And with all that, she's still like, I'm not giving those guys the money they want.
I do admire Janey-E's tenacity and just say, no, they'll get what they deserve and nothing else.
Yep.
Yeah, I can kind of see why somebody who's felt trodden on their entire life, you know, no quarter, I'll keep what's mine, thank you very much. You can kind of see how that might pan out.
Does becoming quite rich turn you into that sort of person?
Yes.
Suddenly she's not willing to share the wealth. You know, she gets that money and the guys are like, oh, he owes us 52 grand, and she's like, do you know what? You'll get half that because I'm
To be
rich.
fair though, we don't know that she wouldn't share the wealth. She's not going to share it with these scumbags, which I don't know necessarily is such a bad thing. Like, bear in mind, these are guys who, you know, prey on the weak. So, you know, I no sympathy for these two douchebags.
I think Janey-E becomes part of the 1%. That's my hot take. Hoarding wealth.
I don't think she becomes the 1% in the process of this narrative, but we might theorise that she could going forward.
Janey-E's going to space, man.
Janey-E Bezos.
That's the other spin-off David Lynch is going to do.
On Amazon TV, naturally. Janey-E does stop just for 1 second to ask, where is your car anyway? I feel like she should be way more concerned about this.
turns up with 425 grand, can't tie his own shoelaces, can't use the toilet on his own, doesn't know where his car is, doesn't have any ID. Get to
There
work.
are a lot of gaps here that Janey-E seems to be glossing over. All she can see is dollar signs right now.
I kind of like the fact that she's completely unflappable, though. Do you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't matter what the fuck is going on. Like, her husband, that she's presumably been with for quite some time now, is just like a completely different person, and she's like, okay, just roll with it. Like, it's fine.
Well, this happened.
Yeah. Maybe it's just like so much stuff's going on that I don't understand, but to look at you know what, worth it.
Yeah. I'm liking where this is going. So let's just keep this going and see how we fare.
Go on a bender in a steam bath or something?
Everyone thinks Dougie's got super sexy, like in his office later. Oofed.
Yeah.
But
By the way, that line you just mentioned, Alan, that was going to be my backup intro for the podcast. I was going to say, and back from Bendersville, it's Craig Woods.
I do love how they got what's his name?
Tom Sizemore.
Yeah, Tom Sizemore, like a complete.
Let's discuss that when we get there.
It's because this is the point where she's like, wait, is this the point where Janey-E says, "Are you having one of your episodes?"
Yeah.
Or is that later?
No, she does. I think it's when she drops him off at the office. She says, "I think you're having one of your episodes again." Took you this long to notice Janey-E, but okay.
So we've got to go to Rancho Rosa before that.
Yep. Meanwhile, in Rancho Rosa, just outside the opposite the 119 ladies' house,
We've got your number.
The shipmen pass by, and then shortly
Listening
afterwards,
to Habit by Uniform Needle Drop.
yeah, I shout out wrong uns, and you can tell they're wrong uns because they're listening to the loud rock music.
They're always listening to Uniform.
So that's coded. These guys are wrong uns. It's classic Lynch. Although I think Wild at Heart is the exception to this, where the protagonists are the ones listening to the loud rock music. But Nicolas Cage, of course, has a bit of a bad boy in that role. So yeah.
There's a wee bit of a callback to Wild at Heart in the next episode. Do you not think so? With Balthazar Getty.
Doing all the Nicolas Cage moves. The punches and stuff.
we can touch on that when we get there. Yeah,
For sure.
I made that same note. So Janey-E drops Cooper at work. Has to really cajole him to get out of that car. It's like, come on, man. Come on, Janey-E.
Take him to the hospital!
Really?
Although it's America, like, that 425 grand is not going to touch whatever the hell is wrong with him. Do you know what I mean?
To be fair, you're right. Yeah.
That's a good point.
It's like, she's obviously solidly working class in it. She's like, no, get to fucking work and just, like, suck it up, Dougie. We're poor, we can't afford this fucking shit. This is America.
It's a good point, and in a way, maybe this is chiming back to what I was describing in one of our previous episodes as being the kind of Breaking Bad vibes that occasionally come up in this Las Vegas section of The Return. If only Walter White had proper healthcare, although obviously I know that doesn't really work because Walter White was a mad narcissist, but anyway, he would have done it anyway, guys. If we just gloss over Janey-E's complete obliviousness.
It makes me wonder what his episodes have been like, though.
Right, exactly. How bad have they been? What does she think he does at work? Right? Because in what way does the way he is right now in any way make her think that he can actually go in there and do a day's work for 8 hours? I don't understand what's going on in her head.
Going by what his boss, Battling Bud, says later on, like, he is actually an improvement on his previous, like, incarnation. Do you know what I mean? So it shows you how fucking useless Dougie actually was.
That's a fair point. So anyway, Cooper is crossing the courtyard towards Lucky 7 Insurance, and he sees this lawman statue with a gun outstretched, and he has that moment where my interpretation is, I guess, some deep part of Cooper is like, wait, no, yes, that used to be me kind of thing.
Lawman, yes.
I read somewhere that the statue is based on a likeness of David Lynch's father. So make of that what you will.
Sheriff Lynch.
Yeah.
Which, considering what we know of America and the South, the word Lynch.
Good point, yeah.
Yes. So moving on.
That's problematic.
It's a real feast of colour in this scene. Like Cooper's green jacket just really stands out in amongst all the other colours. We've got the red balloons, and there's a lot of muted tones going on in a lot of the stuff the other people are wearing as they bustle in and out the doors here. Yeah, it's just a classically sumptuous, colourful Lynch shot.
I love how lost Dougie is, just sort of like going round in circles until Phil turns up for the coffees.
Off in dreamland again, huh, Dougie?
Phil's great.
Yeah, the coffee is his compass. It's his dharma.
Yeah,
he follows that.
And of course, Phil's line about Dreamland, we get the double meanings there. Particularly if you're on the train of is this even real, then this is certainly doing nothing to dissuade you from it, I guess. Phil Bisbee, incidentally, first of all, he's played by Josh Fadham, who is also a regular on Better Call Saul.
Never heard of it.
Do you recognise him, Alan? He plays the camera guy
yes!
of the film crew that he employs from time to time. The comedy film crew.
Every time he shows up, I'm going, I recognise this guy. What have I seen him in? Like, I keep going to look him up and then just like forgetting about it. And yes, he's got the glasses.
He's great.
Everything.
Yeah. And his mannerisms are very similar, but he's playing a very different character in this.
Much nicer.
Yes. In Better Call Saul, he's always surly. And the way he plays off against Bob Odenkirk is always really funny. So it's quite cool seeing him in a role in this here. But the other thing I always think about Phil Bisbee is he's essentially Cooper's Earth-based one-armed man, because he's the one that has to guide him literally through corridors and whatnot, and make sure he gets to sit down in his seat properly. For whatever reason, Phil Bisbee has been cast as Dougie's bodyguard in the realm of office finance and all this stuff. He that's his guide in the way that Mike the One-Armed Man is in the spirit world.
Yeah, I love Phil.
Yeah.
Watching this back fully all the way through for the second time, I liked Phil the first time, but he's jumping out as one of my favourite things about the whole show this time. Mm-hmm. Like, I think he's almost always just carrying a stack of coffee cups.
Yep. Do you remember they had it's a quick segue? Do you remember in season 2 of Legion, where there was that scene that was 100% a pastiche of this, where Dan Stevens, in one of his multiple personalities in one of the alternate reality versions, was essentially this Josh Fadham character. And he walked in carrying all the coffees.
Yes.
That was a really neat touch.
So good.
So yeah, they get into the elevator, classic elevator scene with that woman just in the corner of the elevator, just eyeing Dougie. Like, what the fuck
But we
is
get
this guy's
that
problem?
Wait, as soon as coffee is introduced into the equation, two things happen. One, Dougie immediately becomes more attentive and follows it. Mm-hmm. But the second is we get classic Twin Peaks jazz music.
We do.
That kind of like classic Twin Peaks jazz drumming in the background, and it's like, as soon as you drop a cup of coffee into Twin Peaks, this is what happens.
Yep, it's the unspoken law. And of course, Phil even says, "Damn good Joe, huh, Dougie?" He's like, "Damn good Joe." And of course, for those of us who are still clinging on to the idea that Cooper might snap out of it anytime soon, we're like, oh.
The next couple of scenes are full of these little moments where it was like, "Here he is, no." Mm-hmm. Coop's a bit, no, he's not.
Yeah, there's one particular moment specifically, which we'll get to in just a second. So, yeah, we get into that meeting room where all the staff are gathered, including one Anthony Sinclair, played by Tom Sizemore, big star of the 90s, who then went off on what seemed like a 15-year bender, which was what makes it particularly hilarious when he says to Dougie, back from Bendersville.
It's perfect casting.
And I do feel like this is pure Lynch, Frost, nudge, wink shit here, isn't it?
But he's great here. I was really happy to see Sizemore back, because I always liked Tom Sizemore.
Yeah, he's good.
He
brings something to this role that's... He is good, yeah, and it's nice to see him get a nice meaty role in something again. It's a really good performance, I think. He's channeling some of the old sleaze that he used to bring to some of his characters in the 90s. I like how he turns on as soon as the thing we'll discuss in a second, when Cooper pins him with the accusation of lying, just how aggressive he quickly becomes. It's like, it's classic Sizemore.
I love the receptionist's face when Dougie's walking and he's just standing looking at those people, and like Phil's guiding him through. The receptionist just giving him the pure WTF M9 side eyes, like, oh.
Yeah, it's good shit. So we learn in this meeting room, from what Anthony says, that he and Dougie have actually been kind of in cahoots, which is why we get the line much later in the return when Battling Bud Mullins reminds us that Dougie has essentially implicated himself when he basically informs Mullins about what Anthony Sinclair has been up to. And he says, "I covered for your ass, buddy, you owe me one." So we know these two are kind of into the same dodgy shit. So yeah, it's more fuel on that fire of, Dougie was not a good guy.
But this is also classic Mark Frost soap opera style stuff he's putting in here. This whole insurance fraud side story.
Yeah,
it's like the Ghostwood stuff in seasons 1 and 2.
Right,
you know,
it's like the other side of the Ghostwood stuff. It's like that Mr. Neff character from season 1 who visits Catherine. This would be his backstory essentially.
Yep. Poor Frank though.
Okay, I love this scene. Frank.
I want that.
Frank, by the way, the actor who plays Frank actually played a cook in the Double R in the original series.
Really?
It's like blink and you miss him. Yeah.
He's not the first cook that was in the original series that's in these 2 episodes either, guys.
Indeed. So it's cool that this guy is in here. My favourite thing about this, though, is the meta of it, where Frank is upset that he's not getting his classic favourite coffee.
That he never drinks.
So he decides to try the green tea latte.
And he loves it.
And it's like Lynch and Frost saying, we know this isn't the thing you wanted, but maybe just stick with it and you might like it.
Try the green wink tea latte.
Right, yes.
As Dougie's standing there in
with his
fucking...
ultra lime green jacket. Yeah, it's pretty clever shit. Oh yeah, and it's not the only instance of green in this scene. Because as they sit down in the meeting, and Mullins gets Anthony to give them the lowdown on some recent claims, Anthony claims that they have to pay out on a couple of claims that have turned out to be legit. Arson claims, says that there's no arson, it's all cool, we need to pay up. And Cooper, and I mean Cooper with an exclamation mark, says he's lying.
Yeah.
And it's 100% classic Cooper delivery.
Yeah, that's not Dougie, that's Cooper talking Bobby.
Yeah. Right, yes.
In the interrogation room.
You didn't love her anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that classic Cooper. And we get the green light passing over Anthony's face, and it's like symbolising that's like Cooper's intuition reflecting on Anthony kind of thing. And this goes back to what we were discussing last episode, where I was telling you guys about the footage that was shot apparently with classic Cooper talking to the one-armed man in those scenes that we get in the return. Parts that were deleted, where apparently classic Cooper was much more present and actually exchanging in a conversation with the one-armed man. So this would be, I guess, a continuation of that. Like if we'd seen that in the previous episode, we'd be like, oh, here's another bit of classic Cooper. But this is literally the only bit we get in the entirety until classic Cooper actually comes back in part 16. So it is interesting that this bit is left in here, but I guess there is no way you could edit this out.
Aye. How else does it go down that route without it?
Yeah.
Plus, it's just having that one little tiny moment where you're like, "Oh shit!" It's so much more effective.
It does add something having that one moment.
Coming so close after the bit with the statue outside as well, like you're really thinking, "Oh shit!" Like it's happening. It's coming soon.
Right, and I guess in that Lynch way, this is him telling us that no, classic Cooper is present in there. He's just struggling to get out. That's what he's telling us, which is essentially what the scenes with Mike would also tell us, which is why I'm now thinking I can see now why he took those out, because he's like, well, I only need one incident of this, and so he just takes that out. And so in that case, it's quite a well-chosen moment to use.
We also get a little bit of another unresolved storyline with Darren.
Darren and Rhonda,
yeah.
Speak to your wife, Darren. Yeah. I don't understand Rhonda's deal, because she says that, but then she makes advances on Dougie later, whom she must know is also married. What's your deal, Rhonda?
You know, she's like Darren Schmarren, but look at Dale Cooper. I want some of
Dougie's
that.
looking not bad.
And then just listens to him pee.
Yes, as you do. Yeah, you fucking creep, Rhonda. Off his creep.
Yeah, I like that Rhonda helps him though. It's that's a nice kind of Beach Boys moment.
Yes, I see what you did. That's another one for the playlist. So Mullen's unimpressed with Dougie, quote unquote Dougie's accusation against Anthony, hauls him into his office and says, "Okay, smart guy, you're going to have to do some real work around here instead of throwing accusations around," and gives him a bunch of unresolved case files.
He says, "Accusing my best agent."
To which we get the echolalia with a particularly affected Lil agent.
Yep.
Case files. And these are particularly well chosen. But yeah, I mean, the enunciation is there's definitely more intent in the way that Cooper repeats those ones. Yeah, so again, that was us back in the day, like, oh, here he comes. No.
Mr. Lynch fucking with us.
Rhonda leads him to the toilet.
Yeah, Cooper doing the pee-pee dance.
Does her weird flirtation with a man who's clearly in distress. Come on, Rhonda.
Yeah, she's a creep and a predator.
And then we flick back to Vegas, baby.
Yep, still in Vegas. Back to the Silver Mustang.
We're about to meet.
Get to meet the Mitchum brothers.
Sorry, I'm just queuing up the Isn't She Lovely, because we are also about to meet Candy for the first time. We love Candy. Candy,
and whom I call the Radiatorettes, because they remind me of junior versions of the Lady in the Radiator, pre-whatever befalls the Lady in the Radiator to make her appearance such as it is. So yeah, the Mitchums, it's really interesting how they're introduced as these big bad villains, and considering how comical they become in the second half of the return. It's a classic Lynch bait and switch.
The whole scene with them two is sinister as hell. Like, when he's like, how much did we lose? 424,000, and bam!
But yeah, the whole scene with Brett Gilman's Supervisor Burns. I remembered his name for this episode.
I remember that name.
Getting the shit kicked out of him. And stuff is so brutal and so sinister.
It's nasty.
It's like something out of a Scorsese movie. Yeah. It's not pleasant.
You're just waiting Donovan getting played over the background or something.
For Donovan from V.
Yeah, obviously, yeah.
Martin Donovan.
Can't stand the quiet.
See when he says to him, leave town, like...
Leave town. It's the only time in Jim Belushi's career he's ever appeared vaguely menacing.
Jim Belushi, fuck's sake, I'm calling him John.
When we were looking at the cast list again when it was originally released and just saw Jim Belushi, I was like, what? You gotta be kidding me. No way.
And he's actually great in it.
He's so good in it.
It's actually a good casting choice, yeah. It works.
It's the first thing I think I've liked Jim Belushi in forever.
I mean, it's no K9, but it's good.
I don't mean this as a slight on Jim Belushi, but he's not a small man. He's very of large stature, and so and Lynch makes real use of that in the frame, and even the way he's framed, like it's that upward-looking camera shot, and he just gets Jim Belushi to bend down and leave town. It's actually pretty intimidating.
Yeah, Belushi is so intimidating and so good in this, and again, the fact that the Mitchum brothers become such figures of fun is incredible.
But in this moment when you go to that younger guy and tell him he's got the job, it's like, wow, poison chalice, man.
Yeah.
It's Candy and the Radiatorettes, though, just like kind of checking their nails and just like...
It's a very Wild at Heart kind of moment when they're all there, I think.
It is, yeah, yep.
And I thought they were just going to be there as silent background, no pun intended, eye candy, so to speak, in a classic David Lynch style. And even watching this at the time for the first time through, I had no idea that one of them was going to be one of my favourite characters in the entirety of the Twin Peaks franchise.
Who foresaw it from that one scene?
From there, we head back to Rancho Rosa.
We do indeed.
For a moment that I thought, okay, so first time I watched this, I was like, oh man, they're actually going to kill a wee kid. That's horrible, but I don't think they'll do that in this show.
I've got that same note. I thought to myself, David Lynch surely wouldn't kill a kid. No, of course he wouldn't. Kid's fine.
Do you know what? Smart kid looks both ways before he crosses the road. You know? And then I was like, nope, he's going to touch the bomb. He's not going to touch the bomb. He's touching the bomb. Oh, God. And then...
touch my bomb, as the cheeky girl sang.
And then, still listening to the same band as before, the bad guys
just got that
up.
one song in a loop.
They're listening to Tabloid by Uniform this time. Different song. Must be the same album. And
that rock music, James, it all sounds the same.
Yep. They jump out, the guys did jump out the car, shout, fuck off, kid, get the fuck out of here.
Start throwing stones at him.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm glad they're dead.
Fuck off, kid made me absolutely lose it laughing.
Classic Lynch, wholesome.
Yep.
So those guys get what they deserve.
Did he get a car?
They do themselves a blow up.
A la John Travolta. That's not a comment on John Travolta's weight.
Little kid runs back into the house and his mum wakes up.
Yeah, we get that weird overture after she wakes up. That
must be the come down music.
Really weird choice.
But it's cool though, because after that dramatic music we get the return of our favourite. Your favourite, my favourite.
Abdi's favourite.
Jade is back in it. And I love this scene. I love her interaction with this car wash guy. because
Yep.
this car wash guy obviously knows she's a sex worker, and there's absolutely no judgment in this conversation.
Yeah, no, totally.
Chris is so wholesome. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very matter of fact. Yeah, so once again we get, I mean, Lynch is making a point of showing us this key tag every single time. He really wants us to notice that clean place, reasonably priced.
Yep. Now, here's the thing that I don't know, because I looked it up as well, I tried to research this. Was it a common thing back in the days when room keys were actual physical keys for them to have like a return postage address on them, on the fob?
I believe that is the case, yes.
Right.
I mean, I don't think every hotel had that. I don't know for sure, but I think it was like if it's a big enough, swanky enough hotel, then yeah. Which again further gives the ridiculous edge to the whole clean place, reasonably priced.
Yeah. Because I guess it would make sense as well if it's a swanky hotel room. Chances of them having like multiple copies of keys for one room are slightly slimmer. So if you accidentally check out a hotel and you're like, oh no, I've got the key, just sling it in a mailbox and we'll take it back. Yeah, makes sense. The actress who plays Jade, whose name I had written down here but I can't find it.
Nafessa Williams.
Nafessa Williams, yep. I looked up her IMDb. She's been in quite a lot of stuff recently. She was in Black Lightning, which I've not watched yet.
Yeah.
I knew that, yeah.
But it was on my to-watch list, but it's definitely in my to-watch list now because she lights up the screen when she's on it, man. She is great.
Does,
I wish
yeah.
we'd had more Jade in this show.
Same.
Definitely.
Anyway, shall we have some double R wholesomeness?
I think we should. We get a very brief double R wholesomeness. We get to enjoy Norma doing the books at her at one of her tables. It's like, has she not got an office that she can do this in? That's valuable customer space, Norma. No wonder some of your outlets in your franchise are going downhill.
She's a woman of the people, Craig.
Okay, so I was super confused, right, when I watched this. I missed this the first time I watched it, but when Becky comes in and Norma says, Toad, Becky's here, I was like, what the fuck's happened to Toad? He's lost so much weight. And I didn't realise that it was a different character with the same name.
Right, so this is one of the many conundrums of the original Twin Peaks series. It seems like somebody goofed somewhere and then it just became part of the canon. So you will remember the same Toad I remember, who was the ginger-haired, bearded guy who was a regular customer in the Double R in the background of scenes in seasons 1 and 2.
Yep, always getting moved out the way when
Yes.
Wentz was turning up.
Yeah, and then he was like eating the chili out the pot and stuff.
Yep, playing chess with Pete.
Yes. You know. So his name was Toad, and Norma always referred to him as Toad. But then, for some reason, the cook became Toad. Different character. But I think it was when David Lynch was making Fire Walk With Me, he made Toad the cook, but a different character, different actor. But just used that name. And I think somebody must have goofed somewhere when David Lynch was making Fire Walk With Me, like a script supervisor or somebody. I don't want to pin the blame on anybody specific, but my theory is somebody misunderstood who David Lynch was asking about because they need to have that character just in the background. They said, oh, that must be Toad, but he was actually talking about the cook, who I don't think the cook ever had a name. And interestingly, the cook was the guy played by the actor we mentioned in the Lucky Seven scene.
Yep.
But the guy
Frank who didn't get his coffee.
Yes, but the guy who played the cook, now called Toad, in Fire Walk With Me, is an actor called Marv Razand. And Marv Razand also comes back as Toad the cook here in this scene. All very confusing, as if Twin Peaks wasn't perplexing enough already. But yeah, two Toads for some reason, two totally different characters, just happen to both be in the Double R. Are you keeping up at home?
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
And then Toadie
like,
from Neighbours comes in, and it all gets super confusing.
Old Toadfish.
But yeah, we get Amanda Seyfried's Becky here. Amanda Seyfried playing high schooler Becky. 31-year-old Amanda Seyfried.
The Amanda Seyfried is playing almost half her own age here.
Yep.
But to be fair, she looks
it.
younger than she is. Yeah. And I don't know about you, but when I merge Mitch and Emick's face and Dan Ashbrook's face in my head, I feel like Amanda Seyfried is kind of believable as their offspring.
Yep. Kind of works. But she's got that bad boy boyfriend with the sports car.
God damn it, Shelley, your damn bad boy loving jeans. Or do the genes come from Bobby because he is the bad boy? You know what? They probably enforce each other in the worst way.
But we get this like classic scene when Stephen and Becky take the sparkle and then do the drive-in. Mm-hmm. And it's just the close-up of Amanda Seyfried's face looking up while I Love How You Love Me by the Paris Sisters is playing. Mm-hmm. And it's just...
Yeah, it's a beautiful directing choice.
Yeah.
And we also have that line, you know, when Norma is trying to tell Shelley not to keep giving her money, says if you don't help her now, it'll be harder to help her later. And Shelley says, we both know that tune. And it's a nice melancholic nod back to the original series.
It's that beautiful framing choice of them just standing kind of like with their arms around each other as well. It's like, yeah.
And that sisterly embrace, yeah.
But also, as much as Stephen is a scumbag and we hate Stephen, I do love his line, I got some great feedback today.
Yes. I got some killer feedback. And then he tells Becky he's going to get her some bread because she's been needing it all day, which is a pun worthy of F. Sobriety.
Yep.
But this scene had a lot of us thinking, is Becky going to be the new Laura Palmer? 5 episodes in, still not yet appreciating that the return was largely going to be made up of vignettes where the characters of Twin Peaks were concerned, and that there was really going to be no overarching great narrative where any of those characters were concerned.
And if there is a new Laura Palmer, the new Laura Palmer is the old Laura Palmer.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Anyway, cue Aerosmith, dug in an elevator.
Yeah, Dougie getting bustled out by all of his very harassed colleagues.
Move, Dougie!
It's so cartoonish. That's like another Simpsons-esque moment. Like, this is the kind of thing Homer Simpson would find himself in this kind of awkward situation. Like one of those episodes where Homer gets a better job for an episode.
Once again, Phil helping him out.
Yep. Then we get a very brief segue to Andy and Hawk. And I love that this is just dropped in here. It's like 2 solid minutes of complete silence as Lynch just pans around the table as they're looking through all the old Laura Palmer evidence. And then Andy has the immortal line, Hawk, I haven't found any Indians.
You found any Indians?
The look on Michael Horsey's face is absolute gold. No, Andy. But the fact that that's the only bit we get sort of gives the impression that they've been sitting there for hours.
Can someone do us a quick time check, guys?
11:15.
Really? Because I thought it's 7 o'clock. Do you know where your freedom is?
What's on your mind, James? You know I'm going to tell you what's on mine.
The fucks are at it again.
Where does one even begin with the joy that is Dr. Amp?
Doing the vamp and lighting the lamp of liberty.
Well, first of all, let's just say this is such a logical progression for Dr. Jacoby. I think it makes complete sense.
Okay, boomer.
But what I particularly like about it is that I don't know, and I don't think Jacoby even knows where he sits on the political spectrum, except that it's definitely on the fringes.
He's a full-on Alex Jones. Everything is a conspiracy.
They're turning the frogs gay.
They're trying to make the owls gay.
Yeah, fuck that acai berry shit from the Amazon. But like Alex Jones, he's just doing it to sell shit.
Yeah, he's an absolute huckster. He'll have whatever narrative inside his own mind to justify this. I will say, actually, at this point, I do really enjoy some of Mark Frost's stuff about Jacoby in the books. That's actually some of the best stuff in the books. Although he does over-egg the pudding a wee bit in the final dossier with him being friends with, like, Jerry Garcia and fucking, it's like,
yeah.
fucking reel it back in, Frost. But other than that, some of the stuff he puts in there is really pretty good in terms of fleshing out what Dr. Jacoby's journey has been since the original series.
I love the flashes to people listening to or watching Dr. Jacoby's podcast.
Yeah. Jerry, of course, I know what I'll be cooking up. And in a way, Dr. Amp, you could say, is at least partly responsible for Jerry's odyssey for what remains of this season. And we know he's also responsible for where Nadine goes after this. So yeah, he's kind of pivotal in the lives of these Twin Peaks denizens.
Dr. Jacoby was marriage counselling Nadine and Ed, and ultimately it's Jacoby that gets that resolves that situation for them, and it's
Yeah,
amazing.
I mean, it only took him 25 years, but he got there eventually. He gets results. That's all that matters.
It's a process, man. It's a process.
But yeah, everything about the infomercial about his golden shovels and stuff is so pitch perfect. This is David Lynch shooting comedy like a proper comedy genius.
100%. This is Lynch showing his best comedy chops. He's really great at this stuff. Russ Tamblyn is also just born to play this character.
Yeah.
He's absolutely... He always embodied the original Jacoby perfectly, but this twist on it, yeah, it's perfect. And he's clearly having a ball playing this role. Dr. Amp, of course, the name Amp makes us think of electricity, and he even has the wee lightning bolts on his bow tie. So... for all his craziness, he's tuned into something, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, you're saying that as if he's wrong about something? Like, what's your point there?
He's got his cosmic flashlight.
His cosmic flashlight, and his wee hand that fits onto his middle finger for flipping the bird. Just when you want to flip the bird, even more of a bird.
What's the ridiculous... I asked this the last time around as well, and I can't remember, but like the ridiculous contraptions for like Wallace and Gromit have and stuff, like there's a name for them, isn't there? Like, and he's got that for like the
Rube Goldberg machine. Yeah.
Yes, that's it. He fucking like hits the switch and the shovel comes down and he cracks it with a hammer.
Everything is so needlessly elaborate. It's like there's definitely a simpler way of doing this.
The first time through watching this, I didn't get that it was a video podcast. I thought that it was like a radio thing.
Right, okay.
Same, and then you see Nadine watching it.
Obviously, she's watching it because this infomercial has like a card and stuff. Yeah.
It looks like a radio thing because he's got the kind of old school mic and stuff like that, and it was just rather than a podcast. But
no, it's full on InfoWars. It's hysterical.
Yeah. And anyway, speaking of InfoWars and conspiracies, we then segue to the Pentagon.
Nice segue. We get Ernie Hudson.
We get another one of the 4 black characters ever in Twin Peaks. I don't know. And again, not in a particularly pivotal role. I mean, you could delete this scene and it would not make any difference, but it's nice to see Ernie Hudson. And Lieutenant Knox telling him that they've had hits on Major Briggs's fingerprints. So
16 hits in 25 years.
Yeah. If it's real, but it won't be, then we got to tell the FBI.
He seems like he's not really that bothered, but Cindy's
he's seen
all
this
about
shit
it.
15 times before.
This is an office in the Pentagon, but I love they've obviously just got a room, stuck a desk, and they're like, I guess if you work at the Pentagon, you'll need a computer, and someone's put their MacBook on the desk, and they're like, that's your Pentagon computer right there.
That's your computer, mate.
Should I open it? Nah, just leave it shut. Maybe we'll get some money from Apple for showing it. I don't know. Who runs the Pentagon? Apple.
This is one of our half-ass sets in the series.
Do you think Ernie Hudson was just passing by and they just threw this scene in? Do you think that was a...
Oh, that's that guy from Ghostbusters. Again, I'm doing New York David Lynch. I don't know why I keep doing
Tell him about the Twinkie!
I'm pretty sure that this is the same room that Charlie and Audrey are in. They're just shot like a different wall.
Yeah. It's just on the other side of Gordon Cole's office.
But like I say, it's always good to see Ernie Hudson. I don't think the last thing I saw Ernie Hudson in was Oz. So
I wasn't
Miss Congeniality.
Was
that before?
That was post Oz, right?
Couldn't tell you.
So yeah, Cindy's getting a quote unquote first class flight out to South Dakota. She hears it's lovely this time of year.
Right.
Yeah.
And monkeys might fly out of my butt.
As if.
Full on Wayne's World moment. And then we get one of the better Roadhouse performances, as you mentioned last episode.
So this is me about to give a positive Roadhouse review, except for the fact it takes place during a scene with perhaps the series' biggest arsehole.
Toxic masculinity personified.
Yeah, but Trouble is David Lynch's son Riley's band, and it's like, well, of course David Lynch's son makes music like this.
Is Riley on guitar?
Yes. How could you mistake him for anybody else? He's pure got his dad's face.
He looks a bit Lynchy, but I didn't know if maybe he was like the guy on sax, because he's quite hidden in the shadows, and I didn't want
the guy on sax is actually the guy from Dirty Beaches.
I don't know who they are.
They're pretty good. In fact, there's no they. He really is Dirty Beaches. But he's made a lot of great kind of stuff, kind of experimental stuff. He also goes by another act under the name of Love Scene, which is also pretty good. Yeah, if you like kind of semi-jazzy ambient stuff, it's pretty decent.
My notes for this scene are all block capitals. Richard fucking Horn, badass, no smoking. Wow, such rebel.
Yeah, totally. I think there's so much going on in this scene and this portrayal of how Lynch presents this character, because you're 100% right. It's like he is an adolescent boy's idea of what it means to be a badass. But at the same time, towards the end of this scene, it's like, oh no, this guy is legitimately dangerous, though.
I like when Zack Snyder comes over and asks him to put a cigarette out.
Do you know who that? Do you not recognise that guy from anywhere else?
I did recognise him, but all I could think is that he looked dead like Zack Snyder.
He is the guy in Mulholland Drive that the hitman kills in the office, who has the little black book.
Oh yeah, he's got shit.
Yeah,
of course.
David Lynch using his old repertory company. But yeah, that guy is not getting paid enough. That's all I'm telling you. I don't mean the actor, I mean the character. Because having to deal with Richard Horn on a probably regular basis, like, come on, get this kid out of here. And
I'm pretty sure he could kick fuck at Richard Horn, though, right?
I suspect
like,
he could as well, but I think there is... Richard Horn, there is that thing about, even though Richard Horn has a troubled relationship with his family, it's that thing of that's the rich kid in town, better not fuck with him. I feel like there is that kind of vibe going on. And considering, even though Ben appears to be a reformed character now, quote unquote, he was the big villain in the town for a long fucking time, and so it's like, maybe just not mess with that family.
Yep. Quick shout out to Eamon Farron, who by all accounts is a super nice guy as well.
Yes, he seems to be,
but
and he's
who
amazing in
consistently
this
is
role.
cast as an evil bastard in
Again, he has
in.
one of those faces, though, doesn't he? He's got the very sharp, angular features.
Did you watch The Witcher season 1?
Uh-huh.
He's like the kind of like big bad Nilfgaard guy in The Witcher.
I saw him in the shitey John Malkovich version of Poirot, in which he was also a wrong-un. So yeah, he seems to get cast in these roles quite a bit, but he's got that kind of weird angular face. I mean, he's a really handsome guy, but it's that kind of handsomeness that's also a bit creepy.
Yeah.
Like, he's got the wild cheekbones and the really pale eyes, and it's like, I mean, you're attractive but also scary.
But again, he's also one of these guys who, like Frank Silva, and as we found out, like the actor who plays Chad, loves engaging with the community as well, and being part of the whole thing. So it's really wholesome and refreshing.
Yeah,
that he is such a good guy. When on screen, he is such an evil bastard on screen.
Yeah, as we will obviously talk about at some point coming up, like, has one of the worst murders I've seen on TV ever.
Yeah, for real,
it's fucking horrific.
I will say this about Richard Horn though. Richard Horn comes out with the best band names I've ever heard. So look out for my future. Look out for my future band, Little Fucking Smoking Babies, and then I've got another band name marked down later as well.
Speaking of actors in this scene, and speaking of Little Fucking Smoking Babies, shout out also to Jane Levy, who is actually quite a prominent actor in a lot of TV dramas, and she's not even Charlotte in this scene, she's Charlotte's friend.
Oh, the one that tells him to stop?
Yeah, that's the only line she has. And it's like, I've seen her in so many things, it's like, it's weird that this is her only scene. That's what's working with Lynch will get you. Sure, I'll cash you. Here, have one line. While your pal gets abused by this nutcase.
The way he grabs Charlotte is like a sort of more insane version of the way Evil Coop grabbed Daria.
It is, yeah, and I think Lynch has definitely drawn that parallel there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, small clues right away that there is a connection between these two characters.
Yep, he's got wronging all over him.
And of course, we also get confirmed in this scene that Chad, as well as just being a pure arsehole, is also a corrupt cop, because of course.
Chad's on the take.
Keep the whole pack.
All Chads are bastards.
This whole thing about the cigarette packet is also like something just out in the 1950s. Do people still do shit like this? Keep the whole pack. Wait. Even Eamon Farron's delivery of that line is just so overdone. Keep the whole pack.
Oh, the fact he just comes up, he's like, "Hey, you got a smoke," which in itself would have been funny enough. But as you say, we learn that Chad is on the take.
And Chad's super inconspicuous, stopping to look at the money, turning around at Richard and doing the wink and the... It's like, no wonder this guy got caught. Jesus Christ.
Spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen any further on. Chad is not a criminal mastermind.
Yeah, so, yeah, Richard, horrible bastard. Chad, worse than we thought. That's the underlining of that scene. Trouble, good band.
Yeah, Trouble or great, but oh god, Richard. I'm not even going to repeat what Richard says to Charlotte, but like,
Yeah, I know.
man,
I
it's so,
didn't even write it down. I was like, nah, I
it's
can't.
so uncomfortable and so like
Yeah.
disgusting.
Fuck that guy.
Yep. They don't pull any punches and going, this guy's a bad guy.
I remember after this episode aired, the Twin Peaks social media accounts posted pictures of Richard with the caption, "He seems nice."
The face that launched 1,000 memes. As we'll see next episode. Speaking of nothing to do with that, actually, we get something that you brought
Nice
up
segue,
earlier.
dude. I can see why you have your own podcast.
Yeah. We get something you brought up earlier. I don't think it was last episode. It might have been the previous episode where we get the photograph of Cooper. It's clearly just a screenshot from an episode of Twin Peaks.
Yeah, I want to bring something up about that, by the way, because a lot of people, when they comment on this scene that I've seen online, and I've even heard people in podcasts talk about it, they always go, "It's weird that they got a picture of Cooper in the red room. How would they have that?" First of all, he's not in the red room in that picture. Can we just get that clear forever?
Yep. It's a wood
He's
backdrop.
not in the red room. It's the wooden wall of the conference room in the sheriff's station, and it's specifically from the episode in season 1 when Cooper is interviewing Dr. Jacoby, and Dr. Jacoby is doing his golf ball trick. That's the scene it's from. So can we just get that mystery out the way? Because it's not a mystery. You're just all wrong about it.
Stop getting Twin Peaks wrong!
Tammy Preston is doing some research, showing her chops as an agent.
She's got the stuff.
She's got the stuff.
Larry Cohen's the stuff, starring Paul Sorvino.
Yeah. She's the first person to take a proper look at the prince.
The Prince of...
Or the Prince of Persia.
Are you done? You all done?
I'm never done. I think you know that.
It's not explained. We're just meant to look for ourselves what is awry in this part. When this first aired, James, did you notice what was wrong?
I immediately noticed the prints were reversed.
Yeah, I did as well. But
The print on the screen is pure zoomed in, but the one on the paper isn't.
Yeah.
And it's almost out
Yeah.
of shot, so you really need to look carefully and realise it's
yeah,
the same
you
print,
need
just
to be
backwards.
comparing them. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that's a really nice touch that Doppelkoop's prints are like reversed.
That's the spiritual mound.
Speaking of Doppelkoop, I love this next scene.
Doppelkoop gets his one private phone call.
Who should
And I
he
do
call?
enjoy Kyle MacLachlan's delivery, knowing full well that Gordon will have told them to record the phone call. So there's that sort of pointed, I am now going to make my private phone call.
Now that
that we're all
everyone's here,
Everyone's...
who
should I call?
Should I call Mr. Strawberry?
So this is one of the great little enigmas in the season. We never learn what Mr. Strawberry is, but Warden Murphy's reaction is just great because it's just adding more fuel to that. Oh, Doppelcooper just knows shit.
I don't think he's taking calls, and Ward Murphy's just like, like pulling the collar.
Go I know who I'll call. And so Doppelcooper works some BLT magic on that telephone.
It's a good job it wasn't an old-fashioned rotary phone, or this scene would have been longer than the sweeping scene.
Part of me thinks, I bet David Lynch suggested using a rotary phone at one point. And there's like an hour-long cut of this scene. But yeah, Doppelcooper plays that telephone like I'm sure I've seen a few people do a gig at Counterflows. That's a hip reference to a Glasgow DIY music experimental festival. Yeah, so this happens. Everything goes wild. We get cookery programs on the prison monitors. We get klaxons going off.
It's like an episode F sobriety.
Yeah,
Good
precisely.
Good
Yeah. And the episode title is The Cow Jumped Over the Moon. Who's he talking to? What does that mean?
Well, he sends it to our good friends in Argentina.
Yep, the same little box. We get another couple of bleeps, and then it turns into a sort of weird deformed gold ingot.
Yep. Similar
And that's the
to...
last we ever see of that, because of course that wraps that up nicely.
Yeah, mystery solved. Thanks, David.
Any questions? No, I didn't think so. No, I won't explain it. Yeah, so at this point, I'm thinking, because it's Buenos Aires, my brain was thinking, is he literally in touch with Philip Jeffries? Is that what's going on? But now, knowing that Philip Jeffries is in the Dutchman's, but who does he think is in Buenos Aires? And who is in Buenos Aires?
I think he's still operating under the misapprehension that Philip Jeffries is still David Bowie in Argentina.
Right, okay.
Whereas Philip Jeffries is a giant fucking coffee pot in the Dutchman's.
Yeah. That tracks, I guess.
Yeah.
So is the box... What is the purpose of this?
Is it about the bunny?
Is it about the bleeping box? This is the thing about this entire season. Even when I come up with what I think is a satisfying overall interpretation of the thing,
You gotta be fucking kidding.
there's always at least one or two pieces that don't quite fit. And I'm like, God damn it, Lynch, you've done it again. You've inland empired me.
Diabolical bastard.
He's got his own MO. Anyway, Dougie can't leave work. He can't leave the car park. There's no loitering here, sir.
All cops are bastards, apart from this guy. He's actually...
This guy, incidentally, played by Alan. Do you recognise this actor?
I thought you said played by Alan. I was like, Alan, were you in the return?
Man of 1,000 faces. It's not Cheech Marin, but...
It is not.
No. Who is it? No,
It's the same actor who plays Nacho's dad in Better Call Saul.
Yes! Jesus,
James,
that's
once
why I
again,
keep
we're
going
hitting that Better Call Saul klaxon. Let's get so many Twin Peaks cast members. But the character of Nacho, incidentally, is played by Miguel Mando, who was Vic the Dick in Orphan Black. So there's another reason why you should watch it. And he's superb.
Anyway, this isn't an episode of F. Sobriety.
We end on this melancholy note, of course, of Cooper unable to leave the statue, and we get the Johnny Jewel windswept, which is going to become a recurring motif for melancholy Dougie Cooper in Las Vegas.
Yep. Johnny Jewel, of course, of Chromatics.
Yeah, and it's a good choice. It's a good choice because it's a jazzy, melancholic piece of melancholic jazz you would find in Twin Peaks and David Lynch classically, but it's got that kind of ersatz Muzak feel about it, which again I'm thinking that's sort of adding to the idea that Cooper is slightly out of reality, but it could also just be a comment on Las Vegas.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's actually pretty good. It's got that sort of weird kind of facade version of something that it's not.
Yeah.
Like most of the Las Vegas strips got. There's a good Blood Brothers song called "You're the Dream Unicorn" about Las Vegas, which I always thought described Las Vegas very well.
I've not heard this.
But we'll put it in the playlist. Got some Blood Brothers in the playlist. Yes, Screamo on the playlist. This is what I've always wanted. Twin Peaks: The Return, Part 6, Don't Die.
Don't die.
Written by Mark Frost and David Lynch, directed by David Lynch. And the scene begins with the same scene that the previous episode ended with, but half an hour later.
Yep. I said there's no loitering here, sir.
I told you to be on your way half an hour ago.
I feel so sad for Cooper in this scene. Knowing that time has passed and he's just been sitting out here. Cooper lost, possibly forever. I feel like that's what David Lynch was partly saying to us. This could be forever, guys.
Yeah. I feel like Janey-E
no
should
way
have
back.
maybe at one point went, oh, that's right, he doesn't have a car and he's fucked.
Okay, so
the
the Janey-E watch, yeah, let's, for fuck's sake, right, so what time is it by now, and you've not noticed he's back yet, and you knew he was not quite with it, to put it mildly, when you dropped him off at work. Janey-E, you need to be more on the ball.
To be fair, like, he fucked off on a bender, like, how many times? Like, I know, like, this is, like, a different context, but, like,
the man she dropped off at work that morning was not capable of going off on a bender.
And to be fair,
like,
she's got Sonny Jim to look after at home. You know, Sonny Jim needs his Wheatos or whatever.
She's been the actual parent here, like the actual grown-up kind of thing in it.
This is true, but still.
Yeah, no, she should definitely have noticed that her insane husband has not returned home.
This is the one area of the season that I do find hard to suspend my disbelief, because I think it's just because it's hammered home so often that people are like, huh, Dougie's having a normal one again. And I'm like, but come on, though. It's like, if you've noticed this guy is not quite right, surely you have to notice at this point he's unable to function. This goes way beyond just having an episode. This is literally... This man appears lobotomized.
I'd just like to take a moment here to add in that I put this in my notes, not in context of anything particular that had happened, but I just thought of it while watching the episode today, and thought it was funny that I just wrote Dugpa Jones. The one good cop brings Dougie home. Janey-E fixes him a sandwich.
A crunchy sandwich.
I've never wanted a packet of crisps more than watching this scene.
Same.
Yeah.
Even if it's just plain crisps, just ready salted on plain bread, somehow the crunch sound is enough for me to think that'd be quite nice right now. So Janey-E does mention again she's going to get him to the doctor, but that quickly gets derailed. She does not take this plan seriously enough.
She has to drive him to work that day. She has to open the door and push him out the car, but she leaves it in his hands to call the people that he owes money to
right, this is what I'm saying, right? There's no consistency here. Like, fuck's sake, Janey-E.
I mean, she's got a job. She's also like the one who's clearly looking after their son and doing all the housework and whatever.
Making all the chocolate.
She has a lot on her plate. Yeah, she's got a lot on her plate, like, no question. But it definitely seems like a bad move on her part to be like, you should sort out the thing which has got us in danger here.
So Janey-E is worried about these case files. Said, Dougie, don't lose your job. We can't get by on $425,000 forever, obviously. And she tells him that he has to go up and say goodnight to Sonny Jim. So Cooper Mr. Magoo's his way up the stairs.
The way he walks past the stairs before he goes up, and she just shouts,
Dougie!
Up the stairs!
He then goes up the stairs and proceeds to walk past the kid's room.
Yeah, eventually makes his way into Sonny Jim's room. We need to talk about Sonny Jim's room, because this is not the room of a kid in the 21st century, with all the cowboy wallpaper, and it seems like a very 1950s bedroom, and I feel like this is another
David
area...
Lynch's bedroom.
Right, yes, it's David... Actually, this has just reminded me, I said something in the previous episode for the first part of the episode that I said I was going to come back to, and then I forgot to come back to it. This is actually the perfect point. The whole Jones family scenario is a very loudly fits into David Lynch's pure romanticization of a very conservative view of what makes the perfect family, and it's very nuclear, very 1950s, very conservative and aesthetic, and it's one of those things that whenever it comes up in Lynch's work, it always reminds me that for all of Lynch's audacity as a filmmaker, fundamentally he's still a conservative, you know, and it's that way where we discussed in the previous episode where so much of his inspiration comes from a certain energy, if you like, that he absorbed as a child, and that's been his creative force his entire life. And a lot of the aesthetics and the philosophy that underpin those aesthetics really comes from a very deep-rooted 1950s conservatism. And it's weird when it turns up in his work sometimes, because it even turns up in Inland Empire. And Inland Empire is one of the most outlandish, crazy, disturbing movies that's ever been made. And yet fundamentally, the ending of that movie, the happy ending is the nuclear family are reunited. And for Lynch, like, that's heaven. And it's almost as if, in fact, one of the things I always think about in Fire Walk With Me whenever I'm watching that movie is that it's not just the abuse that Laura suffered. I feel like on a certain level for David Lynch, the fact that the nuclear family itself has been corrupted is the ultimate horror.
But you see, that's the same in all of his work, though. There's always that very conservative Midwest ideal of that nuclear family, and it always, underneath, when you scratch the surface, there's always the darkness, there's always something wrong. Like Blue Velvet, obviously, it spells it out writ large at the start.
And of course, Jeffrey in that movie literally replaces his father and has to try and restore the equilibrium. But because Jeffrey has fallen into darkness, that's where the horror comes from for Lynch in that movie, you know. Yep.
Here with the Joneses, keeping up with those guys. On the surface, you've got that they live in a suburban Las Vegas.
Society.
The perfect
I
nuclear
knew
family.
you were going to say that.
They live
to quote Sylvester Stallone, I knew you'd say that.
And then, but as soon as you scratch the surface, Dougie was a complete fucking monster of a different type, you know. There's always the darkness under there.
It's like his entire career is the kind of cinematic equivalent of American Gothic. The painting.
Not the Sam Raimi TV show.
Really fucking sinister. Yeah.
Even at the end of The Return, with all the uncertainty that Lynch gives us, what is the one happy ending he gives us in that final episode? He makes sure that a version of Cooper returns to reunite that nuclear family. He cannot help himself. Every single time he's got to do it. Even in Wild at Heart, actually, Sailor and Lula, the young rebels, end up becoming a nuclear family, and that's an ending that Lynch actually changed from the novel on which it was based. Because the end of the
novel's all different,
Yeah, Sailor leaves at the end.
They eventually get back together in the book series.
In future books, yeah. But those weren't written at the time that the film was made. So yeah, it's something he just can't help himself.
I've read a book too.
Well, looks like we got ourselves a reader.
So sitting in this weird 1950s bedroom, the little clapping the lights on and off scene.
Mm-hmm. Which always makes me think of Red Dwarf. Which is a hip reference to Michael G. Anderson.
Awooga! Meanwhile, downstairs,
Smeghead.
Janey-E is checking out the mail, and oh man, Naomi Watts' rage in the shout is hilarious.
Yeah, can I just give all the praises to Naomi Watts' performance in this ensuing bit, because it is absolutely fantastic. I love how she goes hot and cold in a matter of seconds. It's incredible. So Dougie Cooper gets dragged back down. So the envelope is a message from the moneylenders.
And it's a photo of Coop and Jade. And do you know, the little smile on his face when he says Jade is like, oh.
I have this note here, and this is my favourite part. As soon as he sees the photo, it's the smile on his face. He goes, Jade. And Janey-E's delivery of, oh, so you admit you know her, look at you holding each other. And Cooper continues, Jade gives two rights. And then, as I said earlier, the Naomi Watts' delivery of, I'll bet she did, is just so on point. And he even says her name again as she's putting the photo down, like Jade.
I love when the moneylender's phone, she puts her finger over her lips, and then he tries to do the same. She just scalps his hand out the way. It's amazing.
I also love how she's the one who's sitting like right next to the phone, and she's like, "Well, aren't you going to get that?
Maybe it's Jade calling."
We wish it was Jade calling. We want more.
We really
Jade.
do.
I want the Jade spin-off.
Yeah.
Jade and her Johns in Washington.
But of course, Janey-E agrees to meet the moneylenders at the park at the corner of Guinevere and Merlin.
Yep, more of Mark Frost's Arthurian obsession.
Yep. He does.
David Lynch has his nuclear family. Mark Frost has his Knights of the Round Table. Which is the more unhealthy?
And then we get the classic traffic lights scene transition.
Yep, we complete with electricity sound effect by Dean Hurley.
Yeah, and then we see Mike having a wee feel about.
Searching for the Wi-Fi signal.
Yep.
Oh, only one bar.
Is it broadband? Or is it dial-up?
Mike says to Coop,
some timeless advice, don't die.
Don't die. Yeah. He gives Dougie Coop what I've written down here as the Black Lodge cheat code. It's Deus Ex Mikena.
I love it.
And Coop proceeds to just write a bunch of like ladder and stair codes on all of the insurance case files.
Yeah.
And we watching it are like, what the fuck are you doing?
Something I wanted to mention about this, actually, I meant to mention it earlier. The fact that Lucky 7 is called Lucky 7. Number 7 is David Lynch's favourite number. He's always said it's his lucky number. And 7 is a lucky number for a lot of people. But it's interesting when Dougie starts doing this, he traces the number 7 with his fingertip at first. That's the very first thing he does. Also, Lucky 7, I noted, is 7 floors up in the building. So yeah, these magic lights that start appearing, I feel like this is less of a lodge thing, actually, and more of Cooper's intuition.
That's the way I read it. Like it's Coop's thing, like more than anything else.
I mean, it certainly reads either way, but although I think maybe the first time I saw it, I was thinking more it's Deus Ex Machina. Deus Ex Mikena might be the title of this episode if only the Hamilton was able to pronounce
Deus
it.
Ex Mike and the Mechanics.
Deus Ex Mike and Sammy the Mechanic. But yeah, these ladders that he draws, I still don't 100% understand what the ladders mean. But you do clearly see that he's always circling the two detectives' names, the two corrupt cops. What is it, Loomis and Stockton?
Yeah.
And then drawn it to Anthony's name. And so it's basically just pointing out that Anthony's a wrong un, he's in cahoots with these two corrupt cops, sort it out. But boy, does this scene go on.
Who gives a fucking shit how long
a drawing ladders on some paper is?
Never mind ladders, never mind stairs.
Back to the rainy streets of Philadelphia, where a very irate, classic Albert Rosenfield is on the phone to Gordon Cole, who's enjoying some fine company in a fine Bordeaux.
I will be thinking of you
while you do this very important work, Albert.
As I drink
I love a night on the town
Bordeaux.
when it's 35 degrees and raining.
Fuck Gene Kelly,
Kelly, you motherfucker.
No one can deliver those lines like Miguel Ferrer.
Oh, so good.
And so this is a moment, James, where I believe you and I had the same experience when it first aired. As soon as he went into this bar and he was sifting through it, I remember thinking to myself, okay, it's Diane. It's got to be Laura Dern. It's got to be Laura Dern.
It's got to be.
And as soon as you saw her from the back, I was like, yes!
Yeah.
It couldn't be anybody else.
Max Vaughn's bar, no less.
Yep, Max Vaughn. Oh, fuck, that's a reference to... What is that a reference to, by the way?
Most likely a reference to Sunset Boulevard's Max Vaughn.
Of course
Maryland.
it's Sunset Boulevard.
Of course it's
Fuck's
Sunset
sake.
Boulevard.
Yes.
If it's David Lynch and Sunset Boulevard, it's The Fall.
If it's Sunset Boulevard and Franz Kafka, it's Lynch.
But yeah, you're right. We see Laura Dern from the back, and we know Laura Dern. She's just got one of those necks.
Yeah, absolutely. She's unmistakable. Also, interestingly, it's just before we meet Diane, we get a fuck you from Albert, and that will become Diane's catchphrase.
Always love to see Laura Dern on screen.
Yeah,
but especially in David Lynch projects.
Yeah, same. Yeah, she's never the same anywhere else.
as great as she was in Big Little Lies.
Mm-hmm. Or indeed anything. But there's something special about her work with Lynch.
I said it's the gif of "I said thank you" in Big Little Lies. It's one of my favourite Laura Dern moments.
Thank you. Let us all get along. I said thank you!
Maybe you shouldn't be living here! It's a hip reference to the Pierce Brosnan movie Taffin.
Then maybe you shouldn't be living here!
Anyway, immediately after the Laura Dern drop, we get a special guest appearance by Run the Jewels.
Yeah, I recall a few people making that same comparison. The guy does have kind of Killer Mike vibes, the way he's just... I don't know, has Killer Mike ever held an assault rifle? I don't know that I've ever seen that, but the guy does have Killer Mike vibes.
Yeah.
So
everybody's got a bag of dope and a gun.
So that's maybe what is this now, the fourth black character in the entirety of Twin Peaks. No lines, of course, because let's
just
not get crazy. And of course he's a hood armed with a gun. I see you, Lynch.
As we discussed last week, David Lynch is a mad racist. So.
Anyway, so yeah, the Richard and Red scene. So this is an immortal scene, and alright. So first thing to say about this, Balthazar Getty is fucking amazing in this scene.
Yep.
And I remember saying this to you before, James. I never particularly thought that Balthazar Getty prior to this was that great an actor, and I also never particularly thought he was a particularly handsome guy before this. But see, in this scene, holy shit, he's a good looking guy. I think he's one of those people who grew into his looks as he got older. But second of all, holy shit, man, he does more acting in this scene than he did in the entirety of his career prior.
Oh, completely.
First of all, this character is so off the wall that it would be an easy thing to just do too much or too little, and I feel he hits it just right. And I did not quite realise that Balthazar Getty had this level of madcap in him. It's the only time I've seen him do this kind of thing. And as we said before, it is like a very kind of classic Lynch character, like something that would belong in that classic Blue Velvet Wild at Heart period, where there were just these background characters who were just up to mad shit, had their own shit going on, and you only got a glimpse of their psychosis without any context of where that came from or what it was in reference to.
If this had been in the 90s, this would have been Willem Dafoe.
Yeah,
exactly what I was thinking there. Right?
Or Charlie Sheen, because Bottles
Winning.
Like does have a good like sort of Charlie Sheen energy about him as well.
He kind of does.
Kind of a look of a young
well.
Charlie as well. But you know what's amazing about this scene is the sound design. Every time he whips those arms around, it's like whoosh.
Yeah, it's great. It's sort of reminiscent of Nicolas Cage in Wild at Heart, as you were saying earlier. But if Sailor went demonic.
Yeah.
But yeah, and Balthazar get his actions in those moments. He all the finger guns and all the weird gestures, and also twirling the finger guns and then holstering them. Like, all of that shit is just. It's just so perfect. It's pitch perfect, and it's not a. It's the kind of thing we say. This a lot of people say this is not a remotely naturalist performance, but I'm willing to bet there's people like this guy out there.
Yeah. Plus, there's the thing that like Richard Horn is high as shit during this scene.
Right, exactly. And so, how much of this is Richard's perception of Red?
Yeah. But we also saw in the end of the last episode, we saw Richard being what we would assume is like the big scary villain. He's a nutcase. He's evil, and he is just outclassed in terms of being a bad guy here by
totally.
Red.
He calls him as like small time, like.
Right, yeah, he hammers that point home, and Red
calls him kid twice.
Red, in the space of these few minutes, is 10 times crazier, 10 times scarier, 10 times more charismatic, and 10 times more dangerous than Richard Horn is, as far as we've been led to believe to this point.
And he does magic tricks.
Right, exactly.
Like actual magic tricks, not illusions.
Which later leads to Richard Horn saying the second great band name of this episode, Stupid Magic Motherfucker. But yeah, there's things like, there's a little moment in this when Red says, you ever see that movie, The King and I? And
yeah,
Richard's
which is a complete non sequitur. Like, he just inserts that in the middle of nowhere.
But it's like, The King and I. You know,
yes, yeah. It reminds of Leland's song, "Getting to Know You," which I think is is that the inference of what Red is saying? I need to get to know you.
Maybe, but then it cuts to like Richard Horn, and then it cuts back to Red, and Red says, "I said I like it."
I said I like it. Yeah,
and he's missed that because he's so fucked. You know, he's like, I'm sure listeners who have drank a lot, let's say, may have been. Like moments where you're of a certain mental state and you just miss parts of conversations and you're like, what?
You see that bit where like the whole scene with Richard and Red, like when they first meet each other? That's crazy, man. Like I thought Craig was going full Bob and Coop there, like.
Amazing.
Hats off, that was a good.
And the joke of the episode award goes to Alan.
But it's interesting some of the stuff Red says here. He drops a few names. He drops the name Mary Ann. You can pick the stuff up at Mary Ann's. We don't know what that is. Presumably, it's just a place where you can pick up the drugs. That's it. And everybody who's in the drug trade knows. Probably Bobby Briggs knows what it is. Maybe he knew what Mary Ann's was back in the late 80s. But Richard is a bit freaked out. Says, how do you know that name? Do you know the area? And Red says, I've been around the past few weeks. And then he says the thing about the King and I. And then he says, I said I liked it. So is he talking about I like the area?
Well, he says he likes the place, and then like he kind of like says a few other things, and then he says that, and then like he says, "Oh, this place is fucking like the sheriff's like 90 years old. It's fucking it's a fucking dead town. It's sleepy or whatever." And he's like, "I said I liked it."
Also, the way he delivers the line where he says, "There's just one problem. I don't know you yet." It's just something about his voice is so great in that bit. Even again with the fingers on the eyes, doing that whole thing. Which is such an old cliche, but when he does it, it's like, it's the time he takes over it. as if he's the first guy ever to do the "I'm watching you" gesture.
Is this the line? I will saw your head open and eat your brain.
Your brains if you fuck me over.
Oh, what a guy! What an evil, amazing guy.
Kind of believe him when he says it as well. It's not an empty threat.
Yeah.
You're like, okay.
It's like, and he clearly notices Richard is having a bit of a meltdown. It's like, you got this under control, kid. And also the typical Lynchian double play of the dialogue, where it's like, this is me, this is you, with a coin. Heads I win, tails you lose, which of course mean the same thing. Just a quick note here. A lot of people had a theory online, and I'm sure you've come across this one, James, that Red is the grown-up version of the Truman boy. Which
David Lynch's son all grown up.
I must admit, I quite like that idea. I don't buy it, but I quite like it.
I'm just glad he didn't have that horrible, creepy mask with a tree. Like,
my grandson is studying magic.
Right, yeah. So he went from creamed corn to coins. Creamed coins. It's another band name. So I can kind of believe it. Age-wise, it sort of works. I mean, Buzzard gets a wee bit older, but he looks good for his age, so it sort of works.
Yeah. He's all about that garmonbozia as well, clearly. Carl Rod drop.
The return of the late, great Harry Dean Stanton.
Press F.
Another of the long list of actors from Twin Peaks who have passed either since this aired or just before it aired, and indeed in between the original, the classic, and return. God, so many Twin Peaks actors are no longer with us. Harry Dean Stanton, of course, more than just a Twin Peaks actor, obviously. Guy was literally in everything.
And brilliant in everything.
Yeah, for real. Yeah. One of the all-time great actors.
His performance in Repo Man is one of my all-time favourite performances by any actor.
Same. I love him in everything. I've never seen him in anything. Yeah. Even if he's only there for a couple of scenes, I'm like, God, another classic Harry Dean Stanton.
The best bit in Avengers.
Yes.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I'd forgotten about that.
Harry Dean Stanton's in the MCU. I totally forgot I had to leave that up there.
Son, you got a condition.
Harry Dean Stanton in Repo Man is the reason I've never got a driving licence. Because the more you drive, the less intelligent you become.
I mean, I'm testament to that, like, no question.
Alright, so before we ensue with what happens with Carl Rod and Richard and all the other characters that are about to converge in these next couple of scenes. Right, yes. Let's first of all talk about the fact that the Fat Trout Trailer Park is apparently now in Twin Peaks, when previously in Fire Walk With Me it was in the town of Deer Meadow.
Oh, I did not catch that.
So Mark Frost gives an explanation of sorts for this in The Secret History of Twin Peaks.
Xanadu.
He tells us that Carl Rod was originally a Twin Peaks resident.
He was abducted by aliens.
He was quote-unquote abducted by aliens as a kid. He was one of 3 kids in Twin Peaks who had a paranormal experience in the woods.
Yep.
One of
he
the
went
other
to school
3,
with a log lady.
Yeah, one of the other 3 being the log lady. And Carl Rod also has a tattoo like the log lady has, and Major Briggs gets in season 2. So the inference being that they both had a Black Lodge experience. And Carl Rod left Twin Peaks at some point to the town of Deer Meadow, where he established the Fat Trout Trailer Park. Mark Frost does not explain, however, how and why Carl Rod returned to Twin Peaks. I don't think there's any explanation given for that. So we're left to fill in that blank. So that's the Mark Frost side of it. The David Lynch side of it is he offers no explanation for this whatsoever.
I'm shocked.
And so he leaves us to interpret what we think Carl Rod's and the Fat Trout Trailer Park's appearance in Twin Peaks Return should mean symbolically and narratively. And I think there's a lot of ways you can interpret this.
I think that it adds quite a lot of credence to your theory that everything in the Return between the beginning and episode 17 is a moment in time in Cooper's head, because Cooper's putting everything together, the entire history of his time in Twin Peaks and his time on the Blue Rose case. And his time on the Blue Rose case began with Carl Rod in the Fat Trout Trailer Park in Deer Meadow. So if he's amalgamating all this together, and it's been 25 years since he did this, so it's possible he's misremembering, or as you say, remembering things in his own way, much like Fred Madison. He's basically taken the whole idea of Carl Rod and the Fat Trout Trailer Park and just bumped them into this Twin Peaks pseudo memory he's having.
I think that works, and also I like that you've absorbed my Twin Peaks: The Return as one single simultaneous moment theory. This has become the prevailing theory.
This is the F-sobriety theory now. Strap in, guys.
Although I would not necessarily I mean, the two can work together, but I would not necessarily tie the simultaneous moment theory together with Cooper's subconscious theory. Theoretically, those two could be separate, but I can see also how they can definitely be part and parcel of the same thing. I think that works, yeah.
And if you're going to have a moment where you remember something, of course you're going to put Harry Dean Stanton in there. He's just the best.
And the way, when you sit and think about that in terms of how the narrative in The Return is constructed, that would be entirely of a piece with the likes of Mulholland Drive, and indeed Inland Empire, and I suppose in a weird way Lost Highway. Like, they all have that similar sort of thing where the protagonist reinterprets their own experience and casts them in a kind of different narrative in order to traverse their own sort of emotional and mental obstacles. So that it would be entirely of a piece if that was the case. But David Lynch being David Lynch, he doesn't come out and say that's what he's doing, but there's enough, I think there's definitely enough in the series as a whole that you can come away with that as an interpretation for sure. The other thing to make note of is, and this is sort of part and parcel, I think it sort of relates symbolically to the idea that we were talking about in our previous episode of the unified Cooper, when Doppel Cooper and classic Cooper merge and they form this sort of greyer Cooper. If you think about the way that Deer Meadow and the trailer park functioned in Fire Walk With Me, they were like a shadow self of Twin Peaks. And the Fat Trout trailer park was almost like a shadow version of the Great Northern, where the Great Northern was a swanky hotel for middle-class people. The Fat Trout trailer park was somewhere where people weren't transient, but they lived essentially in what are transient vehicles, but were rooted in the spot by virtue of being poor and working class. So there was that kind of flip, you know. The idea of Deer Meadow and everything it represents being a dark side to Twin Peaks' light side is in itself the same sort of simplification of good Cooper and bad Cooper. And so if you think about Doppel Cooper and classic Cooper merging into a grey Cooper, it makes sense that the Twin Peaks, as we've already discussed, that we're seeing in The Return, is a bit greyer, is a bit bleaker, is a bit closer to the real world. Then it sort of makes sense that it's absorbed parts of Deer Meadow. That
also works, yeah.
Yeah, I can dig it.
All right, we've solved it, guys. That's
nice one. All right. Well,
we're done.
Thanks for listening.
We've fixed Twin Peaks. But yeah, so again, it's another one of those great examples of where you have these two creators of this franchise, both of whom have very different ways of viewing the meaning of what it is they're doing, and who have very different ways of approaching the narrative. It's clearly very important for Mark Frost to fill in these blanks for the characters, to see them as real people with real agency in a real world. You know, that's clearly very valuable to him. Whereas David Lynch is very comfortable with, I think, very comfortable with viewing his characters sometimes as symbols for other things. And so the fact that Carl Rod's entire existence in Deer Meadow can be uprooted without any given explanation by Lynch to an entirely different locale is fine for Lynch because it serves a symbolic purpose.
Yeah, the fact that Mark Frost doesn't try to explain it though also leads me to believe it is more.
That's
like,
true, yeah.
You know,
yeah,
you would
point.
think that in one of his books Frost would be like, well, actually, there is a reason for that, and the reason is, you know, so that leads me to believe more and more the theory that we're coming up with, or that we're developing as we go on about that the singular moment theory, because if Mark Frost's on board with that, then he wouldn't feel the need to explain
that's an
the appearance
interesting
of that in there at all. Yeah, he being Mark Frost wants to fill out the lore and the background of the character, though, which we get.
Yeah, and he is quite notable for wanting to fill in those blanks. So the fact he didn't fill in that one, you could be onto something there.
Also, on a slightly different note, David Lynch's idea that you're talking about of having protagonists who will misremember stuff or like use memory in a different way to explain stories. I mean, did that start with Lost Highway? It seems like that was his first major.
I don't think so. I actually think Lynch has been doing that since the start of his narrative journey. I mean, I think there's sections of Eraserhead that are arguably less quote-unquote real than other parts.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to tell with Eraserhead because the entire execution of Eraserhead is so dreamlike.
I just find it curious because I feel like it's more explicit in Lost Highway than anything else.
Oh no, it is.
And I wonder if that has to do with David Lynch as a collaborator. I always find, I'm probably going to be kicked out of the David Lynch fan club for this, but I find that David Lynch, when he works with another writer, he does some of his best work. Because I think when he worked with Barry Gifford on Wild at Heart, Lost Highway, those are some of his strongest movies, just as quote unquote straight ahead movies, even though Lost Highway is like berserk. And this work he does with Mark Frost, again, it's the idea of you have someone steering a ship and David Lynch just going like, oh, take your hands off the wheel for a second, we're going over here. I always love that because I sometimes feel like it makes his moments of like pure dream logic seem more dreamy when someone else is going, here's some funny dialogue and a bit of straight ahead narrative.
I think there's a case to be made for that, but I think where it maybe falls down a wee bit is you have to remember that Mulholland Drive and Blue Velvet were both written entirely by Lynch. And for me, those are actually his two best movies. But, you know, obviously his best, quote-unquote, is subjective. But I think both of those movies are among the most audacious things he's ever done. I mean, Blue Velvet's a strange one because it doesn't have, on a narrative level, that wonky narrative thing, or at least it doesn't seem like it.
It does have the world's greatest Robin.
Well, I would argue Blue Velvet is slightly more audacious than Lost Highway is, because I think Blue Velvet is actually, it's doing an audacious thing on that subconscious level in a way that you don't notice it while you're watching it, because it seems like the storyline is linear, but when you actually sit back and think about the narrative of Blue Velvet, it makes no sense whatsoever. There really is very little in the way of cause and effect in Blue Velvet. Like, the characters' motivations don't make sense. Like, Frank's whole keeping Dorothy's husband and sending his severed ear to Dorothy, how is that supposed to keep her alive when she's suicidal? Surely that's going to drive her to suicide. You know, stuff like that just doesn't make sense. There's a lot of details in that movie that are really way more dreamlike than I think anything in Lost Highway. Lost Highway, in a weird sort of way, actually operates on a more cerebral level, even though it's the structure of the story itself is drawing deliberate attention to the fact that no, one of these can't be real, or are they both real? You know, it deliberately forces
one of
you
these kids is doing his own thing.
Pose that question. Right, yeah. Whereas Blue Velvet doesn't do that.
Yeah.
Blue Velvet just lets it leak into your subconscious. It's an interesting thing to think about, as Gordon Cole might say.
Interesting. But is it, though, is it interesting to think about as a wholesome moment at the Double R Diner? Probably not.
Well, you know, this wholesome moment, this is another great example of something that Lynch does a lot in this season, where he gives you a thing he knows you've wanted, but he undercuts it with something really foreboding or distracting. Because I really wanted to see this wholesome moment in the Double R. I was like, oh great, we've got Heidi back. This is so cool, and Shelley being all cutesy, and they've got this cute, and they've got this cutesy customer. This is all the wholesome stuff that I kind of wanted to see again in Double R. But as it's being relayed to us, we're getting the intercut back and forth from Richard Horne at the wheel, clearly having a fucking meltdown. So we know something bad is about to happen.
And also, even on a real subtle level of, like, Miriam leaves a tip, and they're like, oh, she can't afford that.
Right,
like,
yeah, yes.
Poor Miriam. Press F
so,
in advance.
He does this thing a lot where he frustrates the fan service. Like, he gives you the thing that you wanted as fan service, but then he skews it by throwing in all this other stuff at the same time. It's like, the biggest example is in part 17, when he gives us the big reunion in the sheriff's office, but of course he does it with Kyle MacLachlan's face superimposed, that makes us think, wait, is any of this real? And so you're constantly
inside a dream.
Right, and so you're constantly distracted the whole way through, because you're like, what does this mean? I can't even enjoy this moment because I don't know what it means. So there's a lot of that going through all the way through the return.
I've also just written down here in capital letters, fuck, I love Shelley.
Yeah, and it's so great to see her being sweet with the customers, and oh, Shelley, you lovely flawed human being. So yeah, Miriam, a bit too cutesy. You could argue Lynch is leaning on a bit thick.
Yeah, too pure for this world.
Yeah, it's clear something bad is coming her way. And yeah, so Richard Horn is giving it all the kid, I'll show you, you magic motherfucker.
Yeah.
And at first, the first time I saw this, I was like, is something bad going to happen to Carl Rod? Because I don't know if I could handle that.
This is when we were talking earlier on about Harry Dean Stanton's character and whatnot. Like, I was like, this is like the worst thing about this entire bit that's coming up is you go back to Carol saying to the dude he gives a lift, I can't remember his name.
Mickey.
I've been smoking for 75 years every day. And he looks like, I mean, obviously he's really, like, the actor is really ill at this point. He's in death's door. He looks terrible. It's like, what do you come out here for? It's like, it just gets me the hell out of the trailer park for a bit. And it's like, it's just a sad story, but like, he's just a survivor. And then you've got this whole scene with the kid and this is the bit you're coming to, right? The kid and being chased by the mother. And he sees it and he's like, like, this is adorable. And then what unfolds, and it's just like so horrible because the kid obviously has his entire life in front of him, and this guy has had 75 years of fucking absolute misery living in that trailer park and whatnot, and it's just like,
It's one of those things that Lynch does really well, I think, by just having that very simple Harry Dean Stanton looking at the young kid and smiling and thinking, you've got all this ahead of you type thing, and you feel the weight of that without it having to be having there to be any exposition of any kind. And it's such a beautiful, subtle performance by Harry Dean Stanton in that moment as well. Just the tenderness just oozes out of him.
Although, what the fuck is that game that the mother and son are
I
playing?
wrote that down as well.
That stupid
game.
Stupid game by Chris Isaac.
In David Lynch's 1950s world, this is obviously something that like is a thing that families do. Isn't it?
That's another thing that's really distracting in this scene, because as soon as the kid appears and I see Harry Dean Stanton look at the kid, I'm like, okay, is the kid gonna die? Surely not. Maybe the mother might die.
Yeah. Something
bad is gonna happen. So all those questions were going through my mind. But at the same point, I also had questions about Mickey, because he'd mentioned Linda, and of course, I'm still, fucking idiot me, I'm still thinking, I'm looking for a Linda, because the giant told us about Linda, and of course that turned out to mean nothing.
Never stop looking for Linda.
Never.
Never stop looking for Linda.
That's enough to make you hue and cry.
But yeah, so this kid's playing this stupid game, and I was genuinely like, this is going to be another fake out, because you thought they were going to blow a kid up in the last episode and it didn't happen.
You're right.
Nothing bad's going to happen to this
David Lynch
kid.
hasn't got the balls to kill a kid. Think again.
The kid that launched 1,000 memes.
Oh boy, did he. Everything about this is so gut-wrenching. Like, the actress who plays the mother's performance I find really affecting. I think she's great in the scene. I feel every ounce of her devastation. I cannot, however, say the same thing about the bystanders.
Oh yeah,
just
the guy in the
bystanders generally, including the driver. Like, what? Okay, so none of these people are actors. I think we can say that for sure, right?
The face palm is amazing.
Yes, that guy labours over that face palm as well, and it's like, what are you doing? And I feel in a weird way Lynch is doing it's a classic Lynch double bind here, because on the one hand he's really accentuating the fact that I think that when people are faced with tragedy, sometimes they just don't know what to do. Like, quite often if you're faced with something so shocking, you just feel so useless in the light of it that you don't know what to do. And I feel like part of him casting actors who, let's face it, can't really act, really accentuates that. The other thing it does, though, is really play about in my mind again with the idea of this being slightly artificial, and that maybe none of this is real once again. So, I don't know. It also has when we were talking before about the bleakness in Twin Peaks and the things becoming a bit more real and whatnot, I feel like there is this sense, and maybe this is more of a Mark Frost thing than a David Lynch thing, but there is this idea, quite a cynical idea, that people today don't know how to react emotionally to scenes of real life tragedy because we've all become desensitized through the media and whatnot. You could view it that way.
Yeah, they all act like NPCs in a video game.
They do, yeah, they're like NPCs.
But yeah, Carl goes to comfort the woman and sees the little kid's soul.
Yeah, or we see a yellow light anyway, whatever word you want to ascribe to it. And there was I remember there was some debate online at the time as to whether the yellow light got absorbed by the telegraph lines.
Yeah. I think it goes past it.
Yeah, it does go past them. Yeah,
but it still cuts to that classic "Fire Walk with Me."
The number 6 telegraph pole.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting one because that telegraph pole was at the original Fat Trout trailer park in Fire Walk with Me, so it has followed Carl Rod to Twin Peaks.
And I'm pretty sure, I may be wrong in this, but I'm pretty sure it's also just the same footage from Fire Walk with Me.
I feel like it might be, yeah. And then it follows Carrie Page to Odessa, Texas in part 18.
Do we not get or is it at the point where Carol sees the cloud, the soul, whatever going up? Do we not hear the electricity thing?
We
as
do.
Well?
Yeah. So it does seem like Black Lodge fuckery is afoot, or just is that just a symbol of this whole universe of Twin Peaks kind of falling apart at the seams?
I kind of thought it was just giving us a clue that he is Coop's son, he's got that.
Yeah, I guess that
to the
works
lodge
as well.
Yeah.
But Richard, weirdly, it's not like he's just driving off laughing maniacally, like I just killed a kid. He's screaming like I told him to move, and
I told you to move out of the way.
So there is the
coke meltdown.
Yep, there is this sort of weird human element buried under all his insanity and evilness. So
right, although even though outwardly his instinct is to go for that spoiled kid routine of somehow this is your fault. Fucking arsehole.
He's the worst. Goodbye, my son. Can't come quick enough.
The other note I had here, it's important to note, I think, that the intersection where this happens, this is the intersection of Fire Walk With Me, where Mike pulls up next to Leland and Laura and says, "It's him! It's your father!"
Right.
Take the ring!
There is just something about this intersection. He sees a lot of action for a small town.
And obviously you've got Miriam, who sees Richard driving by.
Yeah, so that's the important denouement here. Miriam clocks Richard, and Richard clocks Miriam clocking him. So, yeah, we know that's going to end badly.
Our days are numbered. Yep.
Like that telegraph pole.
Yeah. Not quite like that telegraph pole, though, because Miriam's rolling a 7 at that point.
Oh, hey-oh.
Speaking of rolling...
all the way to Vegas.
Ike the Spike's rolling up a new D&D character.
First of all, gay. Second of all, stupid.
Yeah, Duncan Todd, played by Mulholland Drive's fave, Patrick Fischler, gets a red square, not a blue square like the kind certain celebrities post on Instagram, ill-advisedly, which gives him the signal to open a safe and send an envelope to a person, that person being the aforementioned Ike the Spike. So Ike the Spike, another in a line of Lynch midgets. What is it with Lynch and little people?
He loves them. He loves little people. I wonder if there was a literal case of, well, we don't have Mikey, so we gotta have one little person for fan service, and they're like, but we'll make him a psychopath.
That'll even the scales. It's just reminded me actually of when we get the scene towards the end of this episode where Ike the Spike just commits all-out carnage. The behind-the-scenes footage of that, of David Lynch directing Ike the Spike to stab Lorraine, as he's really going for it. And then you just keep going like this and this and this and this. And Peter Deming, the cinematographer, is just behind Lynch slightly back. You just see him recoiling. Look at him going, what? Settle down, man.
Calm down, David.
So yeah, Ike the Spike gets the photos of Lorraine and Dougie, and in a blast of blunted beats, because what else? Impales them both through the head.
You really shouldn't be stabbing that pick into a solid surface, though. It might bend.
Meanwhile, at Rancho Rosa, the cops have turned up, and they've sussed out that this is Dougie's car. So at a snail's pace, the saga of Dougie's car is getting somewhere.
Greg, I found the plate. Is it just police work?
I love the use of the phrase "I found it."
Yeah. Is it just me, or was anyone else also expecting a pizza to be up there?
I was thinking that as well.
But we return to Dougie. Dougie's dressed big pimpin', back in the
back in the classic Cooper suit.
Presumably Janey-E's like, do you know what? You're wearing this suit.
Yeah. Which, I mean, if she knew about what's her name in the office, she she totally wouldn't have been.
That's a good point. Yeah, Rhonda the stalker, Rhonda the creep.
Back to the lime green suit for you, Dougie.
You may find yourself
in a lime green suit.
Amazing.
This is not my cup of coffee. This is not my green tea latte.
The bit in the elevator where he gets stuck between the doors is pure Eraserhead.
Yep, that was also another instance of being my Facebook profile picture for ages, was the being stuck between the doors drinking the coffee.
So, battling Bud Mullins calls Dougie Cooper into his office to sort out this case files carry on. And,
I love how when he shouts Jones, he doesn't respond.
He's just like
Jones.
looking around.
It's not till he shouts, Dougie! He's like, oh, me?
And Tom Sizemore looking suspiciously out of his office.
Kyle MacLachlan's physical comedy is off the chain.
He's brilliant. He's so good.
It's that like two-handed holding the cup of coffee, just like hunched over, following it about. Yeah. It's so good, man.
It's fantastic. Yeah, the posture is just so perfect. I mean, I know we've said this a lot, but Kyle MacLachlan, honestly, he's one of our great living actors, and honestly, the return is just a great case for him being able to do just about anything, because he gets to do so much range in the course of these 18 hours. The only thing I was never convinced about him as before this was being a villain. I knew he could do everything else because I'd seen him do comedy and he was good. I could see him do drama, he was always good. But seeing him be Doppelcooper, I was like, okay, shit, no, this guy can fucking do anything. He's actually a solidly good actor. So yeah, Bud Mullins initially frustrated. So how am I meant to make sense of all these childish scribbles? To which, of course, Cooper replies, make sense of it.
Yeah.
And eventually, of course, he does. He starts to join the dots, almost literally. He says, this is very disturbing. Don't mention this to anybody. Which is kind of hilarious, considering Dougie's capacity for mentioning anything to anybody. For the benefit of the listeners, Alan was just doing the backwards handshake.
The handshake is amazing.
You're an interesting guy.
So Cooper, even in this debilitated state, he's still essentially solving cases.
Yep, he's still the quintessential detective.
Still got it.
Meanwhile, at the corner of Guinevere and Merlin,
I love this.
So Janey-E meets up with the Coen brothers moneylenders.
The pilot for Fargo season 5.
She is absolutely on fire in this scene.
So let me just get this straight. People were playing games. You borrowed $20,000 from you.
What you're asking for is way too much. It's obscene. Nevertheless.
I love that guy as well.
It's when she explains what she gets at her local bank in terms of interest. And then says, what I'm giving you is 25 times more than that. You should be more than grateful.
We're the 99%. We drive shitty cars.
Which, by the way, the wood panel station wagon, the classic American family car, the National Lampoon's mobile that she drives around.
I was just about to say, you've almost got Holiday
the
Road.
The Griswold mobile.
Your head when you see it.
Holiday Road. Hello.
I only found out relatively recently that it was fucking Lindsay Buckingham that did that song. Like,
yeah,
I had no idea.
And since it references Chevy Chase, let me just say, first of all, gay.
Second of all,
stupid.
Yeah, these two moneylenders, they appreciate and they respect Janey-E. She takes no shit.
Well, game respects game, right? Like
tough dame. But this whole thing about, she says, we are living in a dark age and you are part of the problem, which, as much as it's a frivolous line, it does also sort of make me think of some of the things the log lady says later in the season.
It kind of sums up the whole thing we've been saying about like reality creeping into Twin Peaks and whatnot as well. I know that's not Twin Peaks,
and the log lady has this whole thing about the light fading and electricity rising, and it's like there definitely is a continuous theme being woven out through this. I feel on some level that is a bit of Mark Frost cynicism about given this was, I guess this was just pre-Trump when this was written, but certainly I feel like Mark Frost could see which way the weather was blowing, kind of thing.
David Lynch couldn't, because as far as he was concerned, it was beautiful blue skies and golden sunshine all along the way.
Just a bit of transcendental meditation and blue skies all the way. But I feel like for liberals like Mark Frost, who think that Donald Trump is the worst thing that's ever happened in the history of the universe, despite the fact that US imperialism continues unabated. But anyway, I feel Orange Man bad, exactly. I feels like
Cheeto Trump got him.
I feel like there is some of that very milquetoast liberal zeitgeist creeping into this. Just a reminder again, you're listening to a podcast by left-wing people.
It's a very liberals thing to write, but at the same time, it's also not entirely untrue.
No, of course, sure.
You know,
but yeah, it's not my favourite thing. I don't know how to break it to people that times have always been shit. Bad people have always been in charge. You know, the question is how we change it.
I'll tell you how we change it, Craig. We give the moneylenders 25% interest instead of 125 or whatever it was.
Also, golden shovel, like
yeah, we shovel our way out of the shit. Only
cosmic flashlights.
$29.99, 2 coats guaranteed.
Taking down capitalism, one interest payment to moneylenders at a time.
Comrade Janey-E.
Comrade Janey on the ball.
But anyway, moving on.
Ike the Spike doing a brutal fucking murder.
Brutal fucking murder.
Fucking horrible, man.
The contrast between Ike being a pure savage bastard and then when he sees that he's bent his ice pick and just being like, oh.
Yeah, I made the note he goes off Ralph Wiggum because he bent his Wookiee.
Not the last time we're going to see Ike the Spike, but the next time we see him it's going to be even funnier.
It really will be, and even more bizarre as if that was possible.
Yeah.
But yeah, the raw savagery of this murder scene is something else, man. It is one of the most gruesome things Lynch has ever put on screen.
And do you know what Lynch loves? Lynch loves people seeing people being assassinated.
He really does. He's got a weird obsession with it.
Can we talk though about the lady, the way she tries to get away by running right towards the murderer with the ice pick? Like,
right, aye.
You've got a desk, like
Lorraine. You did
not
think
do
this
some Tom and Jerry stuff. Like, I don't know.
Ike the Spike, right, is a vicious psychopathic murderer, right, and a professional killer, but he's only got wee legs. Surely it'd be easy as fuck to
outrun him. Yeah.
And
I
also,
think he's probably get that really good cardio though. Do you know what I mean? Like, she doesn't look as if she was keeping herself in shape. So
he is kind of a tank for a wee guy, isn't he?
In the pantheon of Twin Peaks: Return Mortal Kombat, who do you think would win between Ike the Spike and the Polish accountant?
Oh, the Polish accountant would like level Ike the Spike before he gets close.
I feel like, I think so probably. So. I move guy.
Like Ike would be running towards him with his thing. Polish accountant would pull out an Uzi. Just like
fatality, flawless victory.
I was like, who's the Polish accountant? As soon as you said move car, I was like, oh yes.
This series, man. It's just a banquet of delights.
So we get Hawk, and Hawk finally figures out what has to do with his heritage.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you go, Mark Frost. You get your Nez Perce shit in this. You do it. He writes a lot in the Secret History of Twin Peaks about the Nez Perce people, which are...
About a good quarter of that book is about the Nez Perce.
Yeah, which are the indigenous tribe that Hawk is part of.
Yep. I really enjoy this, and I loved it at the time. And I remember you and I, James, were both gushing about it after this episode aired. We were so excited about where this was going to go.
Because we both knew that what those pages were, right?
Yeah, we both immediately called it that's going to be Laura's diary, and it's going to have the dream about Annie. We both said that, and so to have that come to fruition in the next episode, we were both so happy. But the way this plays out, I just love the understated nature of it. Here's Hawk in the toilet, drops a coin, and then it's just that ominous hum as soon as he's in the cubicle, and it's like, oh wait, what's happening here? Lynch is going to do a thing. I love the way
cubicle,
it plays out.
We saw Philip Gerard become Mike for the first time as well, right?
Right. A lot has gone down in that men's room.
Yes.
One of the things I thought about
tour would be interesting, definitely.
One of the things I thought about during this is the Sheriff's Department in Twin Peaks really has budgetary problems, because in 25 years they have not upgraded this men's room and it is fallen to bits. But fair enough, maybe the money is going to other things in Twin Peaks, which I guess I'm in favour of, but yeah, it's just a bit strange.
Is that like a paint on the stall, you know?
Like, how long has that door been lying open with that bolt off? We're talking 25
years.
Yeah.
And no one's looked at it and went, maybe we should get that fixed at some point. But the interjection of Chad here.
It's amazing.
Have you told the show? You do that, Chad.
Yeah, it's perfect Michael Hoss delivery. You do that, Chad.
Please, Chad.
I'm telling the sheriff.
Use another
Fuck off,
restroom.
Chad. Please use another restroom, Chad. Police
So
business taking place.
Weary, absolutely weary, and it's just like it's Mike Ehrmantraut only.
Yes,
like,
yeah,
as
that's
a
a good
cop.
call. It's a good comparison. Yeah, it's got Jonathan Banks energy or lack of energy.
Okay, Walter.
But yeah, you can tell just how sick of Chad shit Hawk is in this moment.
He said years we've had less than like an episode total of Chad in it, and we're like, fuck this guy. Like, oh my god.
Right now, at this point in the episode, we're like, God, could this guy get any worse? Almost immediately, the answer is, yeah.
We get this scene in the real sheriff station, as we call it, with Frank Truman, and Doris turns up again, and she's ranting and raving because her dad's car is still not operational, apparently. And she's having a bit of a meltdown, and Frank very calmly walks out of the room, guides her down the corridor, and that's where we get this dickhead moment from Chad. I sure wouldn't take that shit from her. And speaking of people sick of Chad shit, I actually don't think anybody's more sick of it than Maggie. Because Maggie's energy in this scene, same energy. It's like, you don't know what you're talking about.
Maggie's great.
It's a free world. I can give my opinion.
I can voice my opinion.
You can.
Oh, you sure can.
Mark Frost is on Twitter far more than
Right,
David
yes.
Lynch, right? Mark Frost is a serious Twitter user, and you can tell that it's a free world. I can voice my opinion. That's Mark Frost going, I've seen this guy online so many
So
times.
Maggie gives us the background here that Frank and Doris's son committed suicide after returning from duty.
Sad about being a soldier.
Fucking hell, this guy, man. It's like, can he sink any lower?
This whole time, Jesse's just sitting there with that same
Staring at
fucking
his
blank
face.
expression on his
And he's
face.
looking off in a weird angle in the room. Like, what is he looking at?
At first I thought he was looking at Maggie, but it's not, right? It's
No,
definitely not. He's
not.
looking up.
Jesse continued to enjoy his first day on Earth. The still of Chad doing the fake crying, I actually had that as my profile picture for a long time. And I actually still do this to this day whenever I see some dude bro in a comment section being upset about anything related to feminism. I always throw in that picture as a comment and go, and just repeat what they said in the alternating upper and lowercase letters. It's an evergreen reaction.
God bless that actor, whose name escapes me right now.
John Petrochillo, is that how you pronounce it? Yeah, no, he's great, and like you were saying earlier, he's really great with the fan base. He does seem like a real salt of the earth type, and he's a member also on Facebook of the group The Cult of Chad, which is a meme group just all about Chad. And he reacts to every single post. It's a joy to see. I also want to mention here
Chad.
just at this moment, 100% Chad. Did you guys ever see that parody video that somebody did about Chad? And it was Michael Jackson's Bad, but changed to Chad.
Yes.
It is funnier than it sounds. I'll drop it in the
in it.
description. Yeah, it is quality.
It's a really well-made video as well. It's really spot on. They've got like the Twin Peaks sheriff cars and stuff.
But it's got all the references to all of Chad's dickish moments. Like, I'll chew on that, and his microwave meals in the conference room, and it's nicely well observed. So yeah, but anyway, speaking of mad arseholes, Richard meanwhile is a quote-unquote cleaning the radiator grill of the truck he just used to run
Such a
over
good
the
job
kid.
he does.
A bottle of water
Literally
and a
with
Kleenex.
half a bottle of Evian
Yep.
and a couple of wipes of a dirty cloth, and it's like, Richard, you might as well not have bothered, mate.
Whilst there's like other parked cars round about him, like he didn't even go somewhere remote. He went to like a place with other people about, screaming and bawling, leaves the engine running, rubs the
This is not a
rag over
truck,
it
this
for
is my
about 3
innocence mobile.
seconds, throws the fucking the liquid in the
Yeah, he
bag
just
into
throws the cloth down on the ground. It's like, what the fuck?
kicks fuck out the motor and then gets back in it and drives away.
You deserve to get caught.
Then we just get a fine Sharon Van Etten performance for the credits.
Not a fan. Not the worst. Not the worst
Fine.
thing, but I find it bland and banal. More like Sharon Van forgetting because it's forgettable. You see.
I don't mind it.
Yeah,
It's
so it was
fine.
out. Yeah. Who was the one a couple episodes ago you fucking hated?
We're not going back down the Au revoir Simone road again. I mean, compared to Au revoir Simone, Sharon Van Etten is fantastic, but I mean, that is such a low praise.
I feel like if they wanted someone to do like sort of country in that style, they could have got Caitlin Rose, and it would have been 100 times better.
She's
I must admit,
amazing.
I don't know who that is.
I fucking love Caitlin Rose. I've been listening to her a lot recently.
Isn't she amazing? I saw her in the Austin Conference Hall at South by Southwest,
Nice.
like in 2011, and there was like 23 people sitting in this huge auditorium watching Caitlin Rose be amazing.
I seen her in stereo and was it the ABC or like I can't remember. I've seen her a couple of times in Glasgow anyway, man. She's fucking brilliant.
Is her middle name
So
Blue?
good.
Yeah,
Yes.
Cool.
she's got her own MO.
Got a birthday card from Caitlin Blue Rose. That is for Caitlin Blue Rose. That's a thing, no.
That's another Libby video I'm going to have to drop in the description.
But yeah, I feel like they should have got Caitlin Rose to do if they wanted a country song of that style. We'll put the video for the Rabbits.
Is that for David Lynch's TV show?
That's for David Lynch's TV show Rabbits.
Cool.
It's not, but it's great.
So it is about the bunny.
And this brings us to the end of another part of Twin Peaks Return.
On that ignominious note.
Yep.
Yeah, so, yes, that wraps that up. We're 6 episodes deep, lads. 6 episodes deep into
Solid
Twin Peaks The
effort.
Return.
A third of the way through the series so far, and nothing resolved yet. And as we know, nothing will be.
Like ever. Depending on your point of view, as Obi-Wan Kenobi might say.
Yeah. Were you still expecting it to follow any sort of linear transition at this point? Or were you accepting of the fact that I think we're just in this for the ride and let's see what happens?
By this point, definitely more the latter. I was no longer thinking we were good. I mean, the show had done everything at this point to let me know we were certainly not getting anything remotely like classic Twin Peaks, and that this was much more, like we said before, much more just like an 18-hour David Lynch movie. So that's what I was strapping in for. I was fully prepared for him to do something utterly outlandish at some point, and sure enough, when part 8 came along, that's what happened.
Anyway, what time is it? It's really late.
Or really early.
Or really early. It's really early.
It's really
or
early.
Really late. So we're going to wind this up.
But we will be back, as mentioned, with more Twin Peaks content super soon.
We will return, if you will.
Return to the return. Alan, you are welcome to join us again if you so wish. We are happy to have you at any time. Should our schedules align, much like Saturn and Jupiter. In the meantime, is there anything you're up to, Alan? Anything you want to shout out? Any plugs you want to make?
Not really.
Cool.
Excellent. Craig, anything you want to say real quick? No?
Don't think so. Just the usual. Check out our F Sobriety Jukebox playlist for all your musical needs.
Yep. Do check out all the links in the episode description.
Yep.
For all of the stuff referenced in the show.
I do try to make them as interesting as possible. So yeah, have a wee look.
Also, we say it every episode, but I'm going to say it again. Thank you for listening, but we have to do all these call to actions that the internet loves. So please, wherever you are listening to us, do, if you're able, leave us a review, upvote, leave us a like. If you're listening to us on YouTube, leave a comment and a like. Subscribe over there. Tell a friend.
Yep.
Let the world know.
Yep.
We would really appreciate it.
Sure
We
do
appreciate you
appreciate
listening.
it.
Especially you, South America.
Absolutely.
Fuck the rest of you.
Alright, guys, I'm just having a look at my drink here, and
what are you drinking tonight, Craig? I didn't even ask you.
I'm actually drinking Jamaican rum. Since we're not having an episode of F Sobriety, I decided I would satiate my appetite another way.
How much of that have you drank there?
Much as we are approaching the midpoint of Twin Peaks The Return, I've approached the midpoint of my drink. Or to phrase it another way, that's half the bottle. To the pit.
To the pit.
F Sobriety, Episode 21, Deus Ex Mikena, was conceived by Craig Woods, James Hamilton, and Alan Todd, edited by James Hamilton, and is a production of Half the Bottle. The theme music is Colossal Estates, by Errors, available on Rock Action Records. We would love it if you joined us on Facebook at facebook.com/fsobrietypodcast, follow us over on Twitter at fsobrietycast, and search YouTube for F Sobriety Podcast and subscribe there. Don't forget to check out all the music ever referenced on the show on the F Sobriety Jukebox on Spotify. I'll be thinking of you doing that while I enjoy this fine Bordeaux.
Unlike that shit show of previous episode. I'm with you, let's do this.
Cue the music. Oh my god, we actually did it at the same time. I'm gonna leave that in because I was so surprised.
I'm making no apologies for any of those things. If you don't like it, I'm sorry, but hopefully you'll still like what we say about Twin Peaks.
I make no apologies, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, you edit that. You know what I meant.
Typical leftist hypocrisy.
The Max von Sydow is not a woodsman. You're thinking of Jürgen Prochnow.
Fuck. I'm going to edit that out so that someone can edit it.